natural resources aren't part of what we are supposed to be looking at. However, so we just did a prioritization exercise for the state water plan. And one of the things when we looked at some of the priorities across the board, whether it be anything that any of the agencies are all of the agencies, as a matter of fact, that have to do with water, because water is my thing, is that there isn't enough support for the people on the ground who are making the decisions and implementing statewide issues. And so I think from every single sub-working group, working anywhere, it needs to be a recommendation that the people that are implementing this have to be supported. And that is going to mean better outcomes for the environment, but it's also going to mean better outcomes for the development process, because you don't have a bunch of people on the ground that are not sure what they're doing or what they're supposed to be doing, and no one can answer those questions.
Yeah, but agreed, but I think we have to keep, again, our focus is we're not gonna get at the end of it. I think that's certainly part of our recommendation.
Just wanted to air
No,
my grievance.
100%.
We're discussing just that.
Yes.
No, but we're specifically talking exactly what you're saying, and I totally get it.
It's another bullet point.
Absolutely.
Today, we need to think about staff and funding. Staffing and funding are the same thing.
Training.
Getting about time and money.
So if we want to put it down as a bullet point now,
Because they are being talked about in other areas too, yes.
And did we identify the data needs specifically?
well, I think we're gonna go through Stu's, and then I would like to go through the data.
Okay.
All right, so our bullets were naturally occurring. Work group? And, adequate funding, is that what we're? For adequate resources, I'll say.
Resources, because the funding would go back to.
Yeah, you said that the interface factors,
Just the interface factors. The only reason I say it is because if you're taking projects from one, shifting it, right, if the DEP projects are going to shift to the DPH, naturally occurring's one, interface factor's one. All right, interface factor. And maybe we can work on some of these if we get through what we're supposed to get through, right?
Could that interface in the, also we call it jurisdiction shift, because we need to definitely talk about jurisdiction shift throughout all three of these groups. We are getting deep systems. So what you just said with the naturally occurring soils and the.
Oh, how, yes. So you're saying if a site shifts from DEP to DPH, those issues.
Mhm.
of the existing.
Yeah.
We got a bunch for it.
That's required.
Of existing sites.
That's correct.
DPH site shift.
Was that already
Yeah.
planned for, Matt?
Yeah, that, right. We're working on that with Deep. Well, I mean, the idea of what we asked for is ideally electronic transfers
Okay, great.
that we can give both to locals and us,
Okay.
and then paper files as well.
We need to start monitoring reports.
It's more just about just what it is, like who the owner is, where it's located. Well, I don't have to get into all those that much in the weeds, although pretty much they should give us the entire file. But yeah, that we're being worked on. We haven't really gotten a definitive answer from them on that, which is quite frustrating.
But we can, I'll say advocate for it.
Yeah, just absolutely, please.
All right, so now I think we've heard from Matt on his idea and the basis of it. And Stu is going to give us an idea he had that more or less works along the same lines, but might be a little simpler to implement still, or might be more
Well, I think there
all
might be
encompassing.
might be some efficiency there.
Okay, let's hear it.
And so this goes back to, and we've obviously digressed for a while, but it goes right back to what Matt was talking about. And simplified version of where I think we came from was the new regulations that were to take effect the beginning of July were tabled for the moment, and we came into being as this working group. So I said to myself after one of our big group meetings, and we kind of were just talking about, hi, who are we and everything, and I said, okay, what should I do here? And I put down literally 4 or 5 pages of thoughts. And then I condensed it back to what I think is, I'm gonna call it the top of the regulatory pyramid as it pertains to
Hey,
the
Stu, one second. Mark, do you have what Stu put forth, or can we get it up on the screen?
That would be great. I don't have it.
It was in
Put up on
the,
the screen right now.
oh, yeah. Peter, do you have that? Did you find it?
Even if he
Is it the
did, even if he emailed it to me, that'd be fine. I don't care. I mean, that would be great. Yeah,
Maybe Elizabeth.
Here we go. There it is.
yeah,
Good.
yeah. So this was great.
All right, Stu, back at it.
All right. So, I condensed my thoughts back to, I had many of the same thoughts that we've discussed here today about a variety of issues, but I realized the time is short. I think I say that in here somewhere. We got to have this report back by February. So in order to make some forward progress, and try to fulfill what the statute charged us with doing, which was looking at, we'll call it a cost benefit analysis and environmental analysis, a potential environmental risk from septic systems, and look at or view through the lens of trying to, if not keep things less expensive, at least control costs to a certain extent. This is only a piece of the puzzle, but it is a significant piece on many of the projects. I said the top of the regulatory pyramid, as it pertains to what Matt talked about, is this delegation of authority between DEEP and Department of Public Health. Now this goes back, I'm just going to give the quick background again, goes back to it started at 5,000 gallons a day. I asked Randy May 40 years ago when I was basically new to the whole thing, Randy, where'd this come from? And Randy's kind of laughed, whether it was true or not. He said, "Oh, we just were told to pick a number, and this is kind of where we landed. We threw some numbers around." So he didn't put forth any regulatory basis for which 5,000 was chosen, but that number became dogma. And the biggest problem from the perspective of a developer, and then it becomes my problem as the engineer, is it's based on a per property basis. Each individual piece of property is limited to whatever that number is. We went from 5,000, it's currently 7,500. I was proposed to go to 10, but then this nitrogen thing came in, which is how we all came to be. Anyway, bottom line is, the per property basis meant that a guy, and down here where we have great soils in some places along the coast, I could have a 2 or 3 or 4 acre site, and we might get a septic system for 7,500 gallons a day on there and still have some more room to grow, but they're constrained. And the reason that it's a problem is DEEP, historically has been, as Matt alluded to earlier, because they are not prescriptive. It takes forever to get anything reviewed. It takes forever to get anything approved. There's, additional permitting every used to be 5-year renewals. Now it's 10-year renewals, all of the O&M, all of the various things. And of course, nitrogen was a part of that whole puzzle. It never made sense to me to say per property. It always made sense to say per acre, we'll call it acre of buildable land, some kind of soil, for lack of a better analogy at the moment, a place that's inland wetlands or a river or a lake, for instance, even though you might own it, maybe that doesn't count. But let's say you have a decent, upland soils, and let's say you have 10 acres going back through the model that that Matt and his group put forth. I believe the number 1,637 gallons an acre sounds right. I worked the numbers when it first was proposed.
So
back
you
in
work
May.
backwards
I was
from
from
Matt's
that,
numbers?
and I think it's 1637. I hope I'm not misremembering that. But I said to myself, okay, so looking at it from that perspective, what we're saying is, if you have a 4.5 or 5 acre site, you get to 7,500 gallons a day. But what if you have a 10 or a 20 or a 30 acre site? And we do see these. And what happens now is the developer comes in and says, I got to move forward with this. I want to keep this going. So how can I do it? Well, okay, if you had 2 pieces of property or 3 pieces, each one's entitled to 7,500, assuming the septic system can work. So subdivision. Well, there's a lot of reasons why that is a problem. It's a headache for Matt. It's a headache for the DEP, but it's also inefficient in general. If you're trying, again, to control the cost of some of these developments, it doesn't mean that every site is the greatest site in the world for townhouses or, large apartment buildings, but there are sites where it could, where it would benefit. And it would, to a certain extent, saying, okay, we're going to do this. The regulatory threshold between DPH and DEEP would be, whether it's 7,500 or 10,000 gallons, it would be the size of the leach field would not exceed. So Matt's group would regulate every leach field up to 7,500 or 10,000 gallons a day, assuming that there are separate leach fields positioned around the site. There are other regulations that would have to be complied with, such as MLSS, to address things like hydraulics. And we would back out of it. Whatever we come up with on a per acre basis for nitrogen loading would then kick into play. Let's say it stayed the same as it was originally proposed. Again, about a 5 acre site would be entitled to about 7,500 gallons a day. A 10 acre site, about 15,000, but they have to build leach fields, under. In other words, you can't put in one 15,000 gallon leach field. What we're trying to do is work within the existing regulations. You've got scalable regulations that work. I'm just looking at Matt right now. We know that they work up to those thresholds using percolation testing and the existing regimen of other site evaluation. We know that they work to place those size leach fields. I suppose they probably would work for bigger, but we don't know that, and I'm trying to simplify.
So Stu, you're saying, building on what Matt has and the acceptance of 7,500 gallons a day and however many pounds per acre,
However we
your
want to
assessment-
find nitrogen.
you follow me, Matt?
That, I get, I mean, it's,
And so
Yeah.
Stu's
In other
saying,
words, what we're
but how does it avoid the jurisdiction?
So-
That's the,
so he's-
splitting lots.
This is where our legislature comes in. This is why we're here. We're going to make recommendations to the legislature. If we agree on this.
Well, how does this fix that problem of not splitting the lots?
the first
People
first question-
don't want to, as a general, I can never say no. I
Yeah,
mean, maybe others have different experiences. Oh, virtually to a person,
it's a.
our clients walk in the door and they say, I got a piece of land and I want to do this big development with 50 or 100 or 200 units, whatever. We can call it affordable housing, we can call it incentive housing zones, or we can call it housing which isn't going to cost as much as the so-called McMansion along the Connecticut River. Not as expensive, less expensive, more affordable, however you want to put it. Those guys simply want to build a large, and it's easier to do, integrated development. Many of them come from out of state. You see a lot of these out of state concerns. We did work for Pulte years ago. They have their business model that says this is how we do things. And it's difficult in the state of Connecticut to do it that way. So when they say to us, I want to get this development on this property, as soon as we hear I want to do 160 bedrooms, well, go to DEP, go directly to DEP. And by the way, by the time we do the soil testing, we write a report, you get somebody to take a look at it. They look at it, it goes through, it's a year and a half. Now it's probably 2 years,
But
it's
it's a simple, but it's a simpler.
So the-
hold on.
so the-
Let me try, Stu. Matt, the issue is, do we all agree that the 7,500 gallons a day on 5 acres is the pound, that we're comfortable with that pounds of nitrogen in the environment?
All right, so yeah, so.
Do we agree to that? That's the first question for everybody
Well,
here.
yes, if it's basically taking the parameters that I did.
It took your
simplicity
formula and
and
extrapolated
put
it
it
out.
into- Yes.
that's all we're doing.
No, and I have no problem with that. The only reason why I wanted the formula was that perhaps in the future, it could be manipulated in the technical standards one way or the other, should we need it. If it's something, of course, we could change that.
It's just a different
Okay,
formula. It's got the same thing.
Okay.
I thought this all through too. Again, the devil's always in the detail. Sure. I've been saying this from day one. The easiest way, we were just talking about staffing and how we don't have enough trained people. A trained person has to go through those numbers, right? That sanitarian has to go through those numbers and say 60%, of this, of 40 milligrams a liter times, 60% infiltration in the area. You just say to them, it's 1,637 gallons per acre.
Yeah.
Period.
Sure.
Now that takes.
And that's
how
what-
much does that
that's
take
what
on your
he has
soil
now.
calculator? And that's exactly right. So but then we want to say, okay, in furtherance of trying to move things along so these guys aren't stalled for years, because look, time is money. Somebody has to borrow bazillions of dollars from a bank. And then they're sitting there for 2 years waiting for some people that they're never gonna meet up at, 79 Elm Street to sit around and, throw their candy up in the air, for 2 years so we're trying to say, okay, is there a reasonable way to keep it with the guys who have the prescriptive regulations, right? And those guys can look at it and say, check boxes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay. This meets the regulations, move forward. But there's a recognition too that at some point, I don't know where it is, but I'm trying to keep it inside of a reasonable box so we can move forward without, again, bringing all the devils and the details, right? Sucking all of them in. We know that your regulations right now are scalable up to 7,500 or 10,000 gallons a day.
We
don't know.
We all agree to that, right? So I think we all agree
So-
that
so-
that pounds, that 5 pounds per acre, whatever Stu's concentrating.
Saying the same thing.
It's the same thing,
Yeah.
right? He's trying to give you.
We're
an
not
indication.
gonna get
Easy,
100%.
easy.
Sure.
But again, to move things forward, we're trying to say, to the extent possible, where it makes sense, from an environmental perspective as well as from an engineering perspective. Keep it with the prescriptive regulations. And that is, it doesn't matter if it's on one piece of property. If I draw an imaginary line, you know the drill. If I put a 7,500 gallon a day septic system in the back lot and one over here in the road, and I draw a line up in the middle, right through the middle, does it make a difference in the functionality of those, or does it make a
No.
difference to the environment?
No,
Not one iota.
No, I get
But
it.
I'm saying, so what we're trying to say is, okay, forget the guy having to draw the line up the middle. Gets rid of your headache. It's also inefficient as soon as you draw that line up the middle. All kinds of other nasty things like,
setback.
coverages, setbacks,
Yeah.
building coverages, maximum floor area ratio.
Getting rid of
All
the
of this-
7,500s?
No. So here's
Property, just all you want to say is it doesn't go by property. You would
Look-
regulate every subsurface sewage disposal system up to, I'm just gonna use a number, okay?
Yeah.
We're just gonna say 10 because that's where it was headed. Up to 10,000 gallons a day. If the subsurface sewage disposal system is 10,000 or under, one system.
Yeah.
You review it. Provided that they meet the nitrogen regulations, which are whatever that is, 1637
Yeah.
per acre. Whatever that number comes out, it can be in pounds per acre, it can be, but then they gotta use their calculator 3 times to get
It
that.
doesn't matter.
So the point is-
We'll come up with
the
a
point is-
formula.
The point is, it takes away any incentive to be drawing these damn lines up the middle, and then I gotta draw a plan, pretend that these people don't know each other,
Yeah.
and, and have buildings over here and driveways going out in separate curb cuts, and the DOT says, what's the hell is this?
So you're saying we're gonna ignore, I just want to give an example.
No,
I have-
no, we're
So
gonna-
let me get this, let me try to simplify this. This table is what? 10 acres, all right? And we want to build 2,750. We want to put 15,000 gallons of water on this table,
Okay.
all right?
Mhm.
So the way we do it now is we subdivide the table in half and we do 2,750s. What Stu's saying is, that's silly. Why don't we say, we're gonna build a 7,500 there and a 7,500 here?
And
If that's the case, nothing's really changed. There's no imaginary line.
Got it.
And you would review those projects because they're.
Even though it's 15,000 gallons.
Yes.
I-
However, wait, Stu, it's my turn.
Yeah.
Stu, my turn. If I went to put 15,000 gallons on this table in one system, I'll just say one septic tank, and you can argue it's hard to get that tank. Let's just set that aside. One septic tank, one leach field, 15,000, not to you, DEP. If it's a 7,500 there and a 7,500 on this end of the table, still one piece of property, DPH. Do you follow the concept?
No, I do.
And obviously, we need to change the rules
But
to
I
make
mean,
it happen.
you could also have a property with individual systems and have 100,000 gallons a day discharge on that property and be.
If it's 75, if it's 7,500, so
No, I,
But here's another analogy. What if you have, what would 100,000 gallons be? What's that, 900 bedrooms or some ridiculous?
yeah, probably.
650 bedrooms. So let's say you have 600, let's say you do a 200 lot subdivision, 200 3-bedroom houses. Okay? Now we're closing in on the theoretical
Yeah.
100,000 gallons, right? That's 90,000 gallons. So if you do that, you would say, oh God, there's 100,000 on one piece of property, but it's a 200-acre piece of property. How do we do it today?
Yeah, you could do it.
We draw 200
Yeah.
lot lines.
Yeah.
Did it make a difference from the environment?
No,
The environment's
Yeah.
perspective, did it make any difference?
yeah, no, you're right.
It's nothing, so it's an arbitrary thing. It's the dogma that's been drilled into us for the last 40 or 50 years. They've been telling us this.
And would there ever be a GEP system ever again then?
I don't
We
know.
hope not.
No, there will, no,
Yes.
there will be, Matt. There will be,
There,
absolutely.
oh, yeah. There are sites that I could show you where this wouldn't work.
Really?
Oh, yeah. There are definitely sites and there are layouts. People have preferences. I want. This is my concept. It's my money, it's my concept, and I think I can build this, and this is gonna be the most wonderful project in the world.
Let me just tell you this. So
Yeah.
this whole thing, the property is in deeps, either statutes, I believe it's in.
We're gonna change something.
So that they would have to, they would have to agree to that. So it's not just DPH.
We understand. So what we're trying to do is put ideas on the table
Sure.
that don't hurt the
Okay, you
environment
can stay-
and are cost effective, all right? That is the goal of this group and that is it. All right, not what I want, not what you want, how we achieve that.
Could I ask,
So the question is, does anybody see an issue environmentally, health perspective, that this open?
understanding that Deep's not in the room,
Mhm.
could you play a devil's advocate here and tell us what Deep would be offended by, other than this is the way we've always done it and it's in our statutes?
Probably not, you're right, because that would, it would reduce the amount of systems under their
I
jurisdiction.
mean, to me, they're always ready to kick the can.
They're the smart ones.
Guy, hey,
Mark, what do you
Mark
think?
Lycourt here. I want to chime in a little bit on this. You're acting as if all the properties, and I'll give you a candy case about even with the regulations, the way they are right now, you know, and I agree with Stu, there's a prescription, if you figure it out, the acreage, it comes out to so many gallons per day per acre. And the way it is right now is, doesn't make any difference whether it's wetland, steep slopes, bedrock, outcropping, or whatever. So you get what you get on the property, regardless of whether it's buildable acreage or not. So that's item number one. And we don't have, you know, a lot of the properties that we still have remaining around the state, a lot of them are challenged, okay? A lot of them are challenged. But the other point here with regards to trying to think you're just going to divide a piece of property and allow 7,500 gallons per day is that outside of Florida or some places dead flat and all the groundwater goes in one direction, we have watersheds that go with each piece of property. And so you may be putting 7,500 gallons a day on a portion of that watershed that's really not going to do anything, and you're going to have a nitrogen issue. So the difference between DPH and going deep is, yes, protective. There's a portion, when you get too big, you're asking for trouble because it's not scientific any longer. And it is, you know, I do a lot of work with hydrology, mod flow analyses, all that sorts of stuff that goes into how these systems really work related to travel, distance, hydraulic gradients. Deep is extremely scientific, period. End of story. DPH is not, it's prescriptive. So trying to think that all of a sudden you have a 100-acre piece of property and then you can get, you know, 10 7,500 gallons in there and you're up to 100,000 gallons, you're asking for trouble. Because
Can't you do it now, Mark? Explain to me why today I could go in there and start subdividing. Why is it any different? Help me with that.
no, the reason is because sometimes when you start breaking up a piece of property, you can't fit 7,500 on those lots. I mean,
Well, that's true. And I think that's-
you can do it. Yes, I agree. I've done it where you're going in, you subdivide it. One of the things I've had with Matt, I know there's a couple of projects that come my way where people have tried to gerrymander, you know, lots just to say that they've got them, and it doesn't work. I mean, those lots should be standing on their own as a matter of real estate that can be resold as a lot, period. Now, when you do this, and again, Dave, there may be situations where, yeah, this could work, but we're not sitting in a world where our properties all have all the same types of conditions on the site. So you're going to get into situations, and a perfect example, guy's got 100 acres. 80 acres of it is wetlands. 20 acres is good. If you do it by that prescription, he's going to tell you that I can get, you know, 100,000 gallons a day on that property. Never going to happen. You know, so you got to be careful. You got to be careful here. There's got to be a limit. There's got to be a limit, because if you go down the road here, I think you've got a non-stopper just from a legislation standpoint. You're going to have people coming out of the woodwork. What?
Hey, Mark, explain this to me. So how does, I understand what you're saying 100%, but how does saying you have to subdivide it change that? So if I've got all the lots of wetlands, lots of ledge, you even if you subdivide it, you can't do it.
That's right. If there's if it's subdivided and it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Period.
Well, we get that, Mark, but I think early on when I started talking about it, I said there would be a recognition that wetlands and other unsuitable areas would be removed from this. In other words, just because you got 5 acres, all 5 acres aren't created equal. In other words,
I agree with that 100%. I agree with that 100%.
So, you know, so your analogy was 20 acres, they'd only be entitled to looking at 20 acres of it.
Right. And then, you know, it's,
So
you're going down a slippery slope. There's got to be a limit. If it is DPH has a limit, whether it's 15,000 or 20,000, if you can do it and each one's 7,500 or whatever. But you cannot have this where you're just opening it up, because I can tell you right now, you're gonna end up having mayhem out here.
So, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make a mention. So to me, there's a big difference between two large systems at 7,500 gallons per day on two sites next to each other versus more of a decentralized approach, like a planned residential development, right? You have and that's like more of our smaller towns are much more likely to approve those, by the way. And I don't see why you need to have that separation distance, or, if this is gonna be like a subdivision anyway, why can't we look at the collective design of the property being, we don't want to have huge failures. If they're smaller, and as you also have a workforce that's actually trained already to do that,
Sure.
I could see where that would be absolutely helpful through on that end, having these are how many systems you
And
have.
from a dilution standpoint, having them
Correct.
spread out.
Yeah, no,
And a
I think
workforce,
it's-
and a workforce part too, you
Yeah.
guys do.
from everything, no, it all makes sense.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to understand is if I take this table and there could be wetlands on this half and ledge on that half, and I subdivide it in half, how Stu's proposal changes anything practically. Does anybody here? I'm not I'm just not there
I think
yet.
what you're asking is how it changes the function of the septic system. I was gonna say.
Yeah.
In terms of the layout of the developments, it changes them profoundly.
Yes,
From the function of the septic systems, I don't see it.
I don't see it.
I agree 100% with what Mark said about excluding unbuildable area. I think that's implicit in that regulation. You don't get to count. You
Well,
don't
the
get to count
simplistic
your.
formula allows you to count every piece of land.
Well,
You know what I mean?
that's probably, yeah,
Well, so that would have to be changed.
yeah, well, so
So,
So then.
One of
then
the
we're back
areas,
to deep
one of the
swing.
areas that to add to Stu's thing is that flat piece of, your table's a flat piece, right?
yes,
Okay? But if you're dealing with a piece of property and the way it is written right now, I could have one system on one side of a divide and the other system on the other side of the divide.
yes.
And the watershed to one could be minute to the watershed to the other, but yet you're treating them both the same as if you're going to get the same benefit for nitrogen, and you're not. You're just not going to.
We're all in
So-
agreement on that,
yeah.
right?
We
Yeah,
agree
no,
100%. The point is
right,
if
but
you
the
draw
way
a line-
it's written, and if you did this even at 7,500, you really got to look at it from a prescription of what the watershed is that's going to allow for the proper dilution for nitrogen.
Back to Deep's formula.
You're back
If you wanted to do that. you're
Maybe
back to
it's
Deep's
a,
formula
Matt,
on
it's
it.
a deep
But-
formula, but if you do it prescriptive, all of that goes away and you're still going to have nitrogen issues because it's just a reality. It's
Match
scientific.
is a simplification, right? And there's all sorts of issues that come with these simplifications, but what I'm trying to focus on is
Yeah.
Stu's aspect of Matt's. He's really just, as far as I can see, he's taken Matt's simplification and just reapplied it without having to draw fake lines on properties.
I don't.
Nothing
well,
changes.
How we- how
the
the-
second.
Well,
part.
wait, so, again, this is the tip of the pyramid here, and that's what is being skirted with those regulations. We're dancing around the DEP, jurisdictional boundary with the regulations going from 5,000, 7,500, 10,000. What we're doing here is if we can come to an agreement that it's okay, provided it's okay to do the 7,500 or 10,000 individual systems without a maximum amount of property, considering, buildable land, because we're looking at it from a nitrogen standpoint. If we come to the agreement, you can do that. The only way that they get to come to you, and this addresses what Mark brought up, it is true that, let's say there's a ridge line and your property goes over the ridge line like a saddle, wraps over, and you've got a big area going down one side and a little one down the other. You're only going to get to count the side where the septic system is.
So you'd have to use
You can
Deep's
look at the
formula.
total, yeah, you gotta have the topography.
You
Well,
couldn't
you just gotta say, within a discrete drainage, area on your side of the property.
But that argument goes to Matt's,
But
the way Matt laid it out
No.
too, doesn't it?
But it's no different than.
No, because
Why?
the way I had this.
Why is yours different?
So mine is the simplistic formula was areas outside of concern. These are just but they just have a huge design flaw.
Yeah.
And it's not realistic if we could take that, but I think it becomes unrealistic for the model you want to do where we can erase property lines and everything else. If you want it, and then have theoretically 100,000
What's the-
under us, as long as each one's
What's the
less.
difference? See, I'm the slow guy in the room. I don't understand the difference between yours and Stu's. If yours is just I'm gonna say it's an oversimplification, right? There's lots of engineering reasons why I could come up with 10 others.
Yeah.
Why, what might affect the ultimate concentration of nitrogen. That's not my job. My job is to understand
Yeah.
why yours works and Stu's doesn't.
Well, I would say just when you start splitting up the properties, and Mark kind of got to that, where again.
They're gonna do it anyway, though.
Well,
No,
Perhaps.
but Dave, you're missing one thing here.
All right, help
And,
me.
and I'm gonna tell you, I mean, I've been on, I can't tell you how many properties, and Stu's done the same thing. So, and you have divides. Now, a guy comes in with a piece of property, well, the guy comes in, does a beautiful job, big development, 200, apartments or whatever else. And he's found spots where he can put his 7,500 gallons a day. But now, what used to be a piece of property that was, all wooded and that sort of thing, it turns in you got one big pavement area, that sort of thing. You got drainage all over the place, whatever. And you put 7,500 gallons in an area all over the place on 5 different places, and the amount of nitrogen dilution that you actually have is not there
I
anymore.
agree. We're not disagreeing
That's
on
the
that.
problem you're going to have when you do this.
But
That
why
is the
is
problem
it?
you're going to do when
but-
you do this.
But I'm a developer. I come in and I've got this site and there's a divide down the middle. And 90% of the water is going towards Greg and your end of the table, and 10% is coming by mine.
Right.
But I have enough land. I'm gonna go subdivide that property, and I'm gonna build a system on the 10% side. I'm gonna build a system on the 90% side. And according to Matt's formula, please tell me why I can't do that.
no, you know what you're making? You're making an argument that we shouldn't allow the simplistic formula.
I'm just trying to
No,
understand.
I agree. No, you're absolutely right. There is no difference. And
There's no difference. I mean, the
The only
part
way
I
to
can
address that would be to require a formula.
All that's gonna happen if that's approved, this is why we didn't like it. I would have been subdividing a number of properties right now. I'd be a
Right.
millionaire. But subdividing properties, and so we
Right.
could put a bunch of 7,500 gallon a day septic systems on it. Easy peasy.
Well, the only thing with that though, is I will say, is if we had the areas of concern was within the wetlands boundary, perhaps splitting the properties up versus having one large property with less flows might have worked out differently. I mean, without coming.
The only way I can,
see your point, though.
the only way I see it is what's the setback to the property lines? How many feet?
Yeah.
10, 15.
10 or
10 or 15, so I'm losing 10 or 15 feet. I'm losing 20 foot on, right? That's, Dave Potts only sees that. I don't see the rest of what you guys are saying, all right?
Okay, just gonna say, it's like a nitrogen calculation like that would really be needed for large systems, right? So if you're gonna be if you're not doing large systems, you're keeping them smaller, again, local health can do it. Why would we need a nitrogen?
I think we said collectively for the property, so.
Exactly, so why would you need one collectively? That would be the same thing like it's in subdivision.
No, I know, I see Dave's point, but then the point though actually is saying that this. If we left it the way I suggested it, that you could play games and not be protective of the environment.
Look, it's an oversimplification.
We should be more strict. I mean, and not because the way to remedy that would be to say everybody does that beat formula. Then that's gonna mix up.
Yeah, I'm not advocating any way, right? I'm
Right.
just asking the question, so
Yeah, no,
everybody understands, so I understand it, right? That's it, that's where I
Well,
am.
so the reality is that, like I said, when we got it from deep, we felt that we had to address in some way, and I wanted to put a simplistic formula for everybody other than areas that are of extreme concern.
Yes.
Because of what we're saying, to allow development potentially. And that was our way of saying that versus if you tomorrow went to deep, it would be significantly more.
Yeah.
Cost and potentially less of a system you would.
Agreed. And you know what, it's the thing that I've learned over and over, I see a lot of groundwater samples in a year. We did that over for what was it, Hawks Nest Beach. We're the ones that did the analysis of nitrogen flux to the Long Island Sound. And I was completely and utterly stunned. When we so we did it in the middle of the summer, we did it at the end of the summer, and we looked at the flux entering the Long Island Sound in the fresh water as it tailed out onto the saltwater. And if I remember correctly, it was something like 7 milligrams per liter average out of the wells along the beach. This is the entire area draining from Route 1 south. All right, you know how many pounds of nitrogen must have been loaded in there? It's mind-boggling.
And they were all in
Right.
septic.
And coming out, say
They
that,
were all in septic.
all on septic, all
Yeah.
right? They have groundwater wells through it. We can argue about the siting of some, but ultimately that entire groundwater table is discharging to the Long Island Sound right there. We can calculate out pounds based, pounds per mile, whatever you want. To have that at 7 blew my mind, right? The proposal was to shift it to New London, to the plant, to sewer. And their discharge levels was I'm gonna say it was somewhere around 14. I forget the exact. Is that what you remember, Sonia?
15, yeah.
So ultimately, you would have doubled the load to the nitrogen to the sound by hooking it up to the sewer. Right? So I make this point because you give me this divide situation. My suspicion is your model, your analysis is not really that far off. All right, now we should maybe
You
do
mean
some
the simplistic form?
your simplistic formula, although you could have the divide. Well, how does it take how many homes are in that area? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. All going on these tiny lots going off. So it's not only the load of nitrogen from the septic, it's the fertilizer, it's the dogs peeing, it's the geese, it's everything, the stormwater. How's it come out at 7? All right, the environment can assimilate nitrogen at a very high level in many settings, not all. If you go to Guilford, where it's sand and gravel tailing out on top of ledge right to the sound, you may have a very different answer.
So Dave, this goes back to your point you made about pounds per dollar, which is the most effective form of treatment, right?
That's ultimately what we all are seeking, right?
Right.
But so I don't know that I would throw it out, Matt, but I think I don't see the difference between Stu's and yours. Just sitting here, my mind can't figure that out.
No, I agree. I agree to the fact that you can simplify the formula to just this per acre. But the part that I want to parse into 2 parts. That's fine. That's
All right, so
but
we
the
all
other
agree
part
on that.
with the
Is that-
jurisdiction thing
is there-
that's a paradigm
let's
shift,
take
another
one-
big paradigm shift.
Let's take one blade at a time.
Yeah.
We all agree that Stu's is materially not different, other than what I can see as the setbacks on each property, so 40 feet or something.
Yeah, that all of this nonsense was semantics. We all knew that forever. We knew that. But no, I don't know if there's a solution. I don't know if that's the solution or not.
I'm not gonna
Yeah.
take sides on anything
Sure.
at this point. I'm just trying to understand, does anyone materially see a difference?
No, I mean, to your point, other than the fact that perhaps though, if we did split it up, there would be, depending on the land, whether it's more usable. Well, no, because if we use that formula, it wouldn't matter.
What I thought somebody was
Yeah.
gonna say to me is, hey, we need to figure out the acreage in that 10-foot setbacks and put a dilution factor in for that, and I agree. All right, I mean, that's the only
Really?
legitimate.
Okay.
What do you think, Mark?
One of the things I would suggest is, because again, we're looking at it as if we're looking at dividing up a flat piece of property. If you were to tell me that you had a buildable acreage and you need 5 acres of dilution area to that system area, that may be something you can look at. Because again, it's really the dilution factor that you got to account for. So the fact that you have 5 acres, but if 5 acres turns out that you put in a system on 5 acres that only has 1 acre of dilution in the buildable area, well, that's not solving your nitrogen problem.
I agree. I hear you. I agree with you from an engineering perspective. My question is not engineering based. My question.
Well, I'm sorry, Dave. I'm going to always come from engineering base because I don't do it any other way. And even on prescription over the years, even the Department of Health has learned their lessons over the years, even though it's prescriptive, there's always been engineers that have come in and
I
given
get it.
them the ideas of obviously making the prescription even better. So
So
in this case here, if the prescription has to take into the watershed area, then you've got something that you can defend. And I think you can even defend with the public and the legislature.
I'm trying to take one bite at a time. I understand the engineering implications and the science implications. I'm asking a very simple question. How does Matt's proposal ultimately differ from Stu's proposal? Period.
Well, you're gonna have to, I'm coming back. I don't necessarily agree with Matt's proposal. Because I've always had this issue. I've always had this issue, and I've had this conversation with Matt before. I've always had the issue that you cannot to handle nitrogen on a prescription, period, without considering watersheds. You can't. You're diluting the reality of the whole idea that we're trying to be environmentally sensitive.
Well, I mean,
And
if you want to go that far, Mark, I'm going to argue that dilution's ridiculous. It's all pounds and pounds removed, but that's not our question on the table. The question on the table right now is simple. How does Matt's differ from Stu's? I'm not taking sides whether Matt's is good or Stu's is good. I hear you 100%, but I'm trying to understand, is there a difference in the two approaches?
Difference in outcome, you're
A difference in outcome in any way? Matt said he didn't see it. I don't see it. And no one else here sees it. Do you see that?
From just on the table basis, there's not a difference.
Okay,
all right. Really is.
So now that I'm good on that. You know, the question ultimately, you know, what is protective of the environment? We haven't got into that yet. I mean, I would argue that dilution is ridiculous, but I mean, that's how we do it.
I'm going to disagree with that on that because I've done a lot of work on dilution, a lot of work.
Well, I mean, ultimately, the concentration of pounds hitting the sound, whether it's diluted or not, is X pounds to the sound. So
there's no question. It's all based on pounds. It really is.
So, all right, we're at a point where Stu's, I think everybody agrees, is, you know, is comparable to Matt's. I'm not taking sides on whether Matt's is environmentally protective or not at this point.
Well, I'd like to, I think where we are is, you know, I think Matt, and I think he said it, the paradigm shift or the dogma or whatever it is. You know, there's a box and it's hard to fight your way out of that box. But there's two parts to it. And I think you have to think about it that way. Part one is simply saying you guys can up to that threshold per septic system. The lot lines don't make a difference in terms of environmental impact. They're
magic.
They're just a pretend thing. They're nothing. The second part of it is the nitrogen and how that's handled. However, what I suggest is rethinking that and saying, okay, if we ended up, you as your group ended up reviewing these large septic systems up to whatever the threshold is that it ends up, whether it's 5,000, 7,500 or 10,000, but unlimited on a property. How the nitrogen regulations that govern those work, and whether we look at it, with dilution or pounds to the sound, or however we're going to view, the nitrogen aspect of it. So you've got, and that can be prescriptive if we come up with a way to do it and say, here's how it's done. Whether it's your simplified method or whether it is a somewhat more, involved method. One of the things that struck me immediately, and it's nitpicking because it is, most of the sites that we work on now that are large almost always have stormwater infiltration. And the point that several have made about paved sites, obviously, if we pave an entire site, there's zero infiltration. We can't even talk about dilution from that site. So, those kind of things have to be taken into account. But again, the paved site almost always has some infiltration in today's world. Not always, but almost always. Certainly, there's always going to be stormwater detention, retention, and so forth. But anyway, those are the things that there's two parts to this. They are numbered 1 and 2, and that's what I think is thinking about it that way. That the idea of keeping it with your group so that it moves things along, it furthers the objective of this working group, which is, facilitate to a certain extent, right? Keep things less expensive. Facilitating helps keep things less expensive. We're hoping that by looking at number 2 and coming up with a good way of evaluating the nitrogen, that protects the environment from the nitrogen perspective, which was mentioned in the same sentence, right? In that statute. So,
Yes, Alicia.
So where is that connection made in the process? So for example, you're
there's 2 bullet points.
No, I'm talking about in practice. So, for example, you can take, let's talk about the Scantic River, which has a TMDL for nitrogen. Not actually, it's bacteria, but actually all of Long Island Sound has a TMDL for nitrogen. But where in the process is that taken into consideration? And how is that applied to whatever formula is put together?
Well, if it's a Long Island Sound, it's simple. If the ridge is all in Connecticut and all in the watershed of the Long Island Sound, it's irrelevant whether it goes right or left.
Well, I understood. So let's talk about a small watershed.
Well,
Or a watershed that has protection.
well, we also had the discussion, I don't know if you were here yet, about groundwater quality and drinking water quality.
Mm-hmm.
And no one has really, sitting at this table in Connecticut, seen a big issue with the wells. I mean, most of our wells are deep rock wells. Now we have shallow wells, and some of those shallow well sites, that could be more of an issue. But even in that case, how many people have seen a shallow well that's got nitrate above it that's from septic systems? Most of it's agriculture, the ones I'm familiar with. So
But do we have that data?
they've got a lot of, well, all right, so why don't we discuss the data for a second then? Because what we're really saying now.
I'm talking about surface water quality goals, right?
Um,
I'm talking about TMDLs, I'm talking about watershed protection plans, everything that Tracy Ayatt's group has put together to try to improve our water quality and bring them up to standards, right?
But it's gonna be drinking water, or is it gonna be the health concern? The environmental concern of nitrogen is when it hits the salt water.
But if we only think about it that way, then we're just going to continue to exacerbate issues upstream, and it continues to accumulate, right?
So our task is to figure out how to be protective of the environment from a nitrogen perspective,
Mhm.
while being as cost effective as possible so as to make housing affordable in Connecticut. That's our task.
Let's talk about a smaller watershed that has a TMDL for nitrogen. Where in the process does that get taken into consideration, and where in the calculation is that?
So give me an example.
We can make one up. I
I
have to check the TMDLs, but I know there are smaller watersheds that have a TMDL for nitrogen.
Maybe if you could bring that to the
Okay.
table, we'd appreciate it.
Okay.
Because, I mean, my science background may be dated, but dated in some respects and very current in other respects. I mean, I deal with nitrogen every single day. It's a huge part of my work. I do not.
And that's why I trust you as someone who does this work.
Well,
I think about others that don't do that.
I'm a huge outdoorsman. Stu's a huge outdoorsman. I value water quality, and the use of it at a very high level. Greg is, and we can go around the table. I am not familiar, and I know there are certain levels when phosphorus is maximized at its maximum, I'll say, productive value in the freshwater ecosystem. Nitrogen can come into play in some little way. It's not my area of expertise. You know, my area of expertise is more saltwater with it.
Okay.
And that's what I know. If anyone else here knows it, I mean, we all want to understand it so we can make good decisions. But the problem I have is if it is not really causing any problems in the state from an environmental or a health perspective, to treat it increases the cost of the housing significantly. And that doesn't seem, it seems like our task is to figure that out.
Can I mention something too? Just
Yes.
some stepping back and looking at this whole thing. You guys got to remember that even moving forward, if we pass and everything, the regulations, even as is, there's always going to be ability to make changes to staff formula, the technical standards.
Agreed.
And particularly the one that we're talking about right now, the deep one, maybe not so much, but we could even probably tweak whether it's required in which areas or not. So just keep that in mind. We don't have to solve everything.
Everyone right now, agreed.
Because there's going to be wiggle room down the road, and everybody here has representation in the code advisory. And we can, you know, obviously make those tweaks. And that was understood. I understood that. There's things that we don't know that are going to come up once this thing is implemented.
But
That's the
Steve,
beauty of it.
you know, what happens there though, is if that's implemented similarly or exactly as proposed, how does that in any way control housing costs? How does it do any of that?
Well, if you look at it from us versus deep, so there's a significant amount of properties that are going to be in this realm that are not in the sensitive areas that would have otherwise had it gone through deep's more comprehensive formula that now do not have to do that. And then your review times are significantly less. And they don't have to be monitored forever anymore. So they don't have that cost of having, you know, the long-term monitoring. So that's a big win just unto itself, I think.
But see, we're still, you know, just circling right back and around to, I have clients right now who want to do big projects.
And 5,000 gallons a
If-
day,
If
years now, hasn't had
Yeah.
that sort of negative assessment requirement.
If those,
So-
but if that goes to 10,000 gallons a day, there's gonna be a line drawn right up the middle, actually three ways of some of the projects.
Sure there.
No,
It
it's
doesn't, it doesn't
I
in
get it.
any way, yeah.
It's frustrating.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it doesn't in any way, from an environmental standpoint, doesn't benefit the environment to make them draw the lines.
Yeah,
That's
to
the
fix that.
Part that drives me
I
crazy.
agree. It's I don't know if that's a solution though.
It seems like, I mean, we all
It
agree
is.
that
Yeah.
Stu's is not, I'm gonna say not any different than yours from an environmental health perspective,
Right.
any of that. I mean, I agree with everything everybody said. You know, does the water go one way? You know, was the concentration exactly the same on each side? Of course it's not. But I'm asking, does it matter? Right? It rolls down the ridge two different ways and it ends up with a Long Island Sound. We gotta get, I think some of this is data driven, and let's go to that for a second. I think the well data or the water quality data that your folks have, I think we should be prudent and look at that and say, where are there, can maybe they can give us a simplified answer. Where are the problems, right? Give us septic system problems, where examples of them that is 100% certain it's from septic, not from not the sewer line running through the septic neighborhood projects. Give us ones that, in a nutshell, it's a problem. Is it ever a problem in deep rock wells, right? All these issues. And then, you know, to go to the DEP questions, you know, from my perspective, I'd like to understand, generally speaking, the loads to the environment. What's the stormwater loads that are being contributed? Can they get shed any data on this? What's the municipal, you know, what's the plants running? Are they the average discharge from a plant is what? The highest they have in the state or the poorest performing is what? The best performing is what? What about the about the alternative treatment systems? What's the at low, high, average? And then we can put it all into context. We can understand what's the load, relative to what we would be contributing.
Do we have to do that now? I'm just saying, for the regulations, or is that something we can mull over when we deal with the details and the technical?
If we're considering what's the most cost effective, I'll give you, maybe we find out that you tell them you shouldn't put nitrogen down in some of these areas. And so let's just say the sewer load is 60%. The stormwater load is 20%. I'm going to oversimplify this. And the septic load is 20%. If you've got to remove all sorts of nitrogen from a watershed and the septic piece of it is so small, you might be better off in instances of removing the fertilizer from it, right?
Yeah.
I
That's
don't.
out of my scope. I can't, but yeah,
But if they could give us just some very simple, we asked, you kind of, if I went to Massachusetts and said, hey, can you give me, if I went to George Hoyfelder and said, Cape Cod, what are the municipal plants, high, low, average? What's the very best AT system running at? What's the very worst running at? What's the septic system running at? What's your stormwater loads? He's going to be able to tell me those numbers off the top of his head, man. We need that level in Connecticut.
well, that's great. That means a statewide database, which we've been asking for a long time. For sure, that needs to come in for AT. There's no question about that needs to be implemented.
It's hard to make some of these determinations,
Oh,
right? Without having a general understanding of the world around us.
I agree. There's a lot that could be done. Even this data that we would like to see from DEEP. I'm dying to see the results of that. To see the conventional system, what kind of removal rates that we have based off of this type of soil, based off of that. type of
Are
soil.
they actually working on getting that?
I think we're going to discuss that today.
One argument can be made that these regs as proposed by Matt or, Stu's concept should even be on hold indefinitely until that data is before us.
No question somebody.
Because
would do that.
the argument, to David's point, is that it could be so de minimis that we're barking up the wrong tree completely, right? And by barking up that wrong tree completely, you're impacting the cost of development, the cost of housing to a degree that heretofore may well be unnecessary. So, until we know the data, the science, etc., it seems illogical to me that we would be proceeding in any way, shape, or form without that information.
Some home builders might disagree. They're having projects on the line. There's time for this to come forward, but
Look, I have lots of friends that wanted to race forward, but all I can tell you is I personally set those monitoring wells down in Hawks Nest, the beach with Tim Myjack. We went through, did it. We looked at salinity levels at depth. We figured out where the freshwater lens was. We measured it. How can that be? It blows my mind. But that says to me, we need to be careful that we're not spending a lot of money to achieve very little effect to the Long Island Sound.
One of the sewer guys over at DEEP had told me that they had an area that was not sewered,
Yes.
and they did monitoring before and after, and they did see a significant.
And I'm sure there's areas like I use the
No, but
Guilford.
I'm curious. I've never seen that data.
There was one over in East Lyme in a certain watershed. But if you told me Sonia is on the beach where it's all ledge going in, I get it. It might very well be that.
No, I'm not just one way or another. I'm just saying it's interesting and I've never seen that data.
Well, Lake Pocatapog is, they went in there and they sewered Lake Pocatapog. The last time I looked, the date has been a number of years now, but you could see the water quality in Lake Pocatapog was getting worse after sewering.
Really?
Why? Because you get more intense development. I would guess, right?
Yes,
More dogs, more, right?
If the state was serious about nitrogen load to Long Island Sound, there'd be no more fertilizing lawns.
Exactly. That's a huge ask. That'd be a huge ask, though. People like their green lawns, including myself.
Do you
Just
guys?
get rid of bonds in general.
Yeah, they are back.
We have,
Right.
But-
England, they're fine.
You know what, but it's not entirely true, because you want organic matter, everybody goes and puts stone down, and it's not. At least look, nature's filter is topsoil, it's wetlands, right? There's organic matter with carbon in it, that's how wastewater is treated. So everybody says get rid of lawns, but it's a bit of an oversimplification. Don't put all these designer lawns are a problem, right? All the pesticides, the herbicides.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sorry,
What do
I'm
we-
still standing by my villain here.
so oversimplification.
Oh, jeez. The Korean American woman.
Can I just say though, no, when these projects come in, like having it based on data is huge for somebody in mobile health. And again, correct me if I'm wrong here, but when it comes down to it, you also are going through these commissions. So having the stuff based on science is very, very big for us not to get stuck in the middle.
Yes,
You know, I'm just saying, like, if we're gonna do it, whatever it is, make sure it's a science that we can definitely back up, or we're gonna be in court again. I don't know.
agreed.
Yeah.
So do we know can we agree what we would like from the Department of Health what's the terminology, what are we asking for? We like to see water well data, potable well data, or what's the ask?
So it's water quality data from public water systems, wells.
Yeah, but you're only talking about
Okay.
transient non-community water supply, we're also talking about private well
Yeah,
water data.
that's what we
Yeah,
want.
that-
well,
we
there's-
are not.
public water systems that are all wells. Case in point, Cromwell, where I live, well fields right on the Connecticut River. Every
Yeah.
time you get a big rainstorm, there's massive discharges. What are the effects to the well fields there? I don't know.
But we definitely need to see private wells. right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know where you get that. There's no.
Well, but the health departments would have to know when there's problems, right? I mean, you guys would know if somebody is getting sick or there's a problem with the well, don't you know it?
I think my
Yeah,
has done a decent amount of
We have
work
to be
on
more,
this.
you know,
And I
that's
think
it. Well,
reaching out to him will be helpful.
Here's host?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and at least he can give sort of guidance on what's available and where the data gaps are. I think he would be a good person to bring into this conversation.
Well, here's another way to look at it, another question. Every time somebody drills a new well, it's sampled,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Now, if bedrock, the groundwater in the bedrock is being polluted by nitrogen or anything else, how often do you see a water test for a new well that shows any of those constituents? How many hits do you get?
Probably not much.
Because groundwater in the bedrock, obviously, especially in, the higher yield ones, it's gonna be traveling, it can.
Might have come
So
from
if there is a
Vermont.
connectivity between the overburden and the bedrock and it's getting in there, you should be seeing it in new wells. The state is developed heavily enough. And most of these places are in subdivisions, we're seeing them all the time, there's 20 lots and there's only one lot left. That guy sinks a well, those septic systems have been there for a long time. You should be getting a hit. And I'm not aware of it. I haven't been hearing it. Now, maybe it happens.
Stu, the hits that we get in public health with new wells is uranium and radon.
Radon.
And those are exceedings.
Yeah.
And that's a naturally occurring
Yeah.
thing, so.
But you have to deal with the dug wells too, we still have dug wells.
Yeah,
and
the
we
shallow
can't
wells.
get- Yeah, and you can't deepen them because they're really small properties, usually along lakes or the ocean. And we can't get our well water data the way that we used to. If you were to ask us to get well information, there's a whole process now.
Is there a
We
reason,
the well data once when the well's drilled, that's it.
so is there a reason,
I can send you later.
is there a reason why you can't drill a deeper well on a property?
Why?
Yes,
But yeah.
yes. Salinity.
Oh, yes, right.
There you go.
Coastal areas.
Yeah.
You're right, you're right, yeah.
So the areas in the shoreline communities, sandy soils and the best water is at the surface, you know?
100% correct.
Yeah.
So,
The non-community stuff though, being there, like for instance, some areas of town, like it's all, so you get a ton of data. Of course, now I'm thinking Brookfield Federal Road, but you know what? It's all on sewers. But that kind of would be interesting. Those non-community systems. You want a non-community system that has a septic system with a well.
yeah, the sewer could be better or it could be worse. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
I've seen instances where it's worse.
Exactly. Maybe that would be a nice comparison. Here's a sewered area wells, here's non-sewered area wells. What does it look like? But how about private wells? Isn't there a restriction by the way on release of people's data?
Yes, yes.
Some kind of
Yeah.
funny.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a whole
Yeah,
nother.
that's all in our files.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
so that's a whole nother roadblock right
How
there.
about data from Coventry Lake? That area was, that's years ago. I mean,
Yep, like Crooked Pog,
Coventry Park, Coventry Lake.
all right, so,
Because a private well from a community that's all on lakes or around the ocean has septic systems kind of probably a little different than transient non-community water supply, which would probably get a bigger acre.
Could be, yes and no, but yeah.
So they should technically be.
Yeah, yeah.
most down here, I mean, if you could have municipal along,
Yeah, a few.
can't you?
But that's just saying that I think the water quality might be a little different if you have a property that's the transient non-community water, that's like a restaurant, right?
Yeah.
If you have a large company versus the areas that I'm a little more concerned about when you have, half, not even a 50-foot by 100-foot lot with septic system and a well next to an ocean or a lake.
Yeah,
That water quality I would love to see, because that's what
Yeah.
we're worried about is our residents drinking nitrogen over 10 milligrams per day.
But the lake,
Right, we don't know
the lake aspect, your cheaper option is to drill a new well.
if you can.
Why couldn't you?
First of all, saltwater.
No, I said a
Just
lake. I
a
said a lake.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I think about certain ones, like I remember thinking about Rogers Lake, and you had dug wells all around the place, and you could deepen them, and some would be, I think, the actual concession stand or whatever that place was, like you went down 300 feet, right? That's kind of expensive in the first place, but you can get a 20-foot well right here.
But it's cheap, it's cheaper than a nitrogen removal system.
We'll see if that comes pulls out.
Well, I can tell you, my house is 8 miles north of Long Island Sound. And I have 2 wells, and I didn't know why I had 2 wells, and I started irrigating out of 1 well, and everything started dying. And one day Elizabeth said to me, I think I figured out why everything's dying. All the arborists came and looked. She tastes this blueberry. It tastes like a blueberry. She said, does it taste like a salty blueberry? So that saltwater lens was all the way underneath down to,
Well,
Yeah,
so
a lot of places.
it
I think
happens.
that your criteria for well exceptions, getting septics closer, I mean, do you have any data on, after a well exception?
No,
You
Yeah,
know,
that's a good.
that is a good one.
You know,
I mean,
wait, how do you?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, though, nitrogen thing about it, I mean, unless it's really at really high levels, it's not gonna be something you would even know about. It's only for like, I think, what's it, pregnant women, because it causes methyl.
Your children, yeah, children, yeah.
And it blocks the absorption of oxygen, which makes you blue.
But isn't there science on that that's being questioned? There's a study where every incidence of blue baby syndrome, also there was fecal coliform present,
Oh, really?
which caused the baby to be throwing up, which obviously at some point if the baby doesn't stop throwing up, it gets low on oxygen.
Wow.
So I don't know what the current, I mean, maybe that's, the Department of Health must have.
Can I ask a really stupid question? Is there a national standard by the feds of the allowable amount of nitrogen in drinking water?
Yes.
Yes, that we asked them across the country.
Yeah.
The federal, the drinking water.
It's not to contaminant level.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well-
that's just for drinking water. It's not exactly for the environment either. So.
No.
Yeah. I don't think you're gonna find it's a big problem anymore.
Not drinking water, but the.
Right.
I tend
Drinking
to,
water, drinking wells, sure.
Yeah, groundwater, septic, but drinking water, I don't think, based off of my experience.
that's my experience, but I live in the world I live in. You
Yeah,
know,
but we're not talking shallow wells either. I think you would find it more likely.
Well, we're also talking about data though, because remember, when we have to fight these cases out, and it's gonna go through the town, that's the first thing they're gonna ask. Is it protective of the drinking water? Because everyone comes in here now, oh, they can't build over here, it's gonna have wells, it's gonna have septic and.
So
the shallow wells are, I mean, in my experience, tell me if I'm wrong, it's usually, pathogens, fecal coliform or something like that is the real issue in the wells.
Yes.
Why everybody's putting UV lights on them. It's like,
Yeah,
Yep. Yeah.
or the radioactive stuff.
Yeah.
Getting back though, so where does, the reason for this committee was that there was some opposition to what was proposed with that. Do we agree, on at least the merits of, these special areas? Does anybody have a problem with how that was?
I would think there's special areas, wouldn't you guys? I mean, certainly, the estuary environments over here, they would benefit, would they benefit from nitrogen removal? A little bay, maybe with Niantic Bay, I don't know what other bays. We don't have a lot of bays, but
So was there any objection to how we delineated those areas? And let's go with coastal first. Is that?
Talking about the CAM map.
Yeah, is that, it's,
Well, what we were talking about before is, we had discussed using it maybe as a base, but I think there's places that have to be excluded from it because the CAM maps go way up the Connecticut River. And where does everybody dump their sewage? Connecticut River. Do we really gonna tell somebody, well, you can't put nitrogen in the Connecticut River, but our sewage treatment plant up the way gets the dump? So I would say there's definitely places and probably in the Q River and, Housatonic and Saugatuck, right? Coscob, Thames, right? There's a bunch of them
sure.
that are in the same kind of boat.
That can be
So,
tweaked.
what I'm saying, that's what I'm saying, tweaking.
In
But there are a lot of the plants on the Connecticut River, like the Madawassett, that have spent billions of dollars for tertiary treatment. So I would dismiss.
We're not saying
That.
we're not saying they aren't trying, we're saying it's not working.
the levels. are
They
high.
need more money. Yeah, the levels are still big. Anyway, the
And
point is, I'm not
ultimately,
dismissing.
will that
There's no-
load
Yeah.
from a small site on the river have an effect?
Yeah.
It probably won't, right? Where if you go down, it's sort
I'm
of.
not saying there's
Soil
no-
setting.
Also, you gotta think watershed based, cumulative. I know just from seeing like how things work across the state that we dismiss these one little 1,000 cuts because they're so small. But when you add them up, you have death by 1,000 cuts. So we
Well-
have to keep that in mind.
I do.
There we go. Give me 200 acres and it's gonna be 200 cuts. That's the problem.
But
you know?
that's the way it's already happening, and we're saying
But
if we
the-
have an alternative plan that's the same, it's not getting us anywhere.
Yeah, no, I don't think we're saying an alternative that's the same. I think there's.
Our task is to consider with economics.
Yeah, well, it is, but let's just address what she's. What we're saying here, if I did a 200 lot subdivision, it's, look, there's a lot of things that make that unlikely, but let's just say you do a big subdivision and cut it up into a bunch of lots. It's pretty easy. These guys are gonna look at it locally and say, yeah, it conforms with the health code or it doesn't. No consideration of nitrogen. That would never have kicked in even until 5,000 gallons a day under the old regs. Anything we might agree to here would come in under the nitrogen regs, whatever those are agreed to, whether it's the way they are here or some other model. So it's not ignoring them. What I'm saying is, if you're looking at mapping for nitrogen sensitive areas, is it fair to say that an area immediately downstream of numerous sewage treatment plants that are combined discharge is subject to the same level of concern as one which is, let's say in Guilford, immediately, upgradient of a shellfish bed? Right? There's a difference, I think.
But that's like saying, I ate a large pizza, and I'm trying to lose weight, but so I ate that large pizza, so I'm just gonna eat, 5 candy bars a day. Cause I've already eaten the large pizza, right? And like when you look at that sort of overall health aspects, giving up those candy bars is gonna be significant, even if you ate the large pizza, I maybe that's a horrible analogy.
I like the candy bars.
Well, you can stop eating the pizza and eat the candy bars.
But yeah, I think we're all on the same page with you about thinking about how much is going there. The question is, how can we do it and facilitate some of these other goals? And the goals of the legislature, one of their goals is this housing thing. And simply, saying, well, all of these pieces are going to be treated the same, which is to further restrict development, that sort of goes against what they're asking us to do. And
It's the benefit. So the dollars spent on that project what benefit do they provide the Connecticut River? That's really the question. And I don't see, if you go through Matt's model, I'll just say the oversimplification process, or Stu's, it doesn't matter to me. You plug that in, the Connecticut River, I don't see how that is being affected by that nitrogen myself.
But we're not
Do you
saying,
guys?
I think
I
everything
think
is
we oughta-
cumulative.
if there's a base.
We're on agreement.
Yeah.
There's pounds going to the Long Island Sound. There's gonna be an effect when it gets down there. Maybe there's effect around my house and down, once you get to Essex or something, right? There might be. But if you go through, you put it in, the model in, even if it was right on the bank of the river, let's say it's right on the bank of the river, that's the very worst case scenario. I don't know, every soil type's different. Let's say it's a sand and gravel, and let's say that we're discharging, what, 19 milligrams per liter at the base of the system? Is that the basis of this, of your model?
I think it was to 10.
10, all right, so let's say it's 10 milligrams per liter right at the base. It starts flowing, and even in a scenario like Mark had said, 90% of the water goes one way, 10% goes the other way, so now we're down to 9. And now we're starting to flow through the groundwater, we're getting denitrification as that happens. I mean, it may not be the best in the sand and gravel, but it is happening.
Mhm.
And it hits the river. I don't think the pounds of that, I think that's environmentally protective, is my take on it.
But don't forget, it's not just right there on the Connecticut River. It's on all of the tributaries, everybody's backyard stream,
Yep.
everything. And so it's cumulative. I think, I don't think we're
Cumulative
disagreeing on-
cumulative to the sound or cumulative,
Surface water,
Yeah,
surface water runoff.
yeah.
the Aspetuck Brook up in, let's say, New Milford or something,
Yeah.
right? We'll take something close, is that where it is? Yeah, I think so, but that brook there, that nitrogen flowing down there, probably the preponderance of it is fertilizers. But I don't think, based on my limited scientific understanding, I don't think phosphorus is the rate limiting factor in freshwater ecosystems. Except as far as I understand, very minute areas. So if we're spending dollars to remove nitrogen on a housing project up in New Milford, I'd hope we get an environmental benefit out of that investment. I think that's the essence of what we're being asked.
Yeah, what's the ROI?
I think so. Have you ever looked at just waterfront properties? I'm not talking about trees, I'm talking about waterfront, river waterfront, ocean waterfront. Most of these properties are already overdeveloped, and I don't think it's not a fine signal thing anymore. It is a pollution thing, and then it's getting more work and dealing with that, because the shoreline, right? You got the TMDO. What I mean by that is, like, personally, I think in our cities or our communities that are on the ocean, we're gonna end up having to have AT systems to alleviate the pollution problem. So I don't know how many
But
properties.
what's the problem?
Well, I'm just saying, I don't know how many properties up further, like how much developable land do you honestly have coming down here? Is it such an argument that we need to have it right now? I mean, because like I know for us, a $5 million property is not affordable property. It's not, housing affordable.
But
And that's the problem.
I mean, as I understand it, maybe Jim will tell me differently. The question isn't just on affordable projects, it's on all projects. And if you make the cost of building a $2 million home more, like it or not, those people who can afford the $2 million home are now spending less money on other things, which has a trickle down effect. And we need to get an environmental benefit out of a dollar spent if we want to solve the problem to Long Island Sound. It's the way I see it. And we don't want to unnecessarily increase the price of housing, whether it's for the millionaire on the Long Island Sound or it's for the trailer up in.
But I understand, but increasing the density in general, shoreline not only does that, but also increases impervious. Everything we talk about,
All of this,
water and all that stuff.
I agree, 100%. It's just,
I was just saying, we're talking about sensitive versus not, and he had brought up the CAM part. I said, yes, CAM may be helpful in certain areas. But I honestly think in my big trouble, and Greg, you please, but the lakes, the rivers, the oceans, everybody wants to live there. And that's where we're having a lot of our issues, because that's where the fighting's happening.
So Cape Cod doesn't just say environmentally sensitive areas, they say environmentally sensitive nitrogen area, right?
Now there,
I think
Which-
we might have put that in there.
I think I wrote it at some point.
I can tell you this, we do a lot of surface water sampling during the summers, right? Beaches, lakes, right? All over the state does it. You can predict failure with bacteria based on rainfall, surface water runoff. Where does the bacteria come from? Nitrogen producing animals, right? It's fecal matter, farms, river. I don't know how much of that is attributed to failed septic system. I don't, but you can predict when it rains heavily
Yeah.
for a specific duration, that's when we get the hits. We haven't stayed with us, tons of data, for freshwater lakes, streams, rivers, everything,
Yeah.
so.
And Bob
So
always
maybe we're looking at some of that data also.
Bob Scully always used to say, it's not really the septic systems, it's the ones that are located right in the water table, right?
Yeah.
They don't have the separation distances. And I can tell you, if you have a foot of sand, C33 sand under a system, I mean, you're getting 3 log removal for pathogens from a foot. So and I don't want to diminish I understand 100% where you come from and say, look, every little bit it's a cumulative effect and load, and it definitely it's a consideration. But if we have to do it based on, I guess, risk and dollars, we have to start saying, okay, what is the real benefit we're going to see in the Aspetuck River if we do this? And if the answer is we're really not going to see a benefit, then
I agree. Where's the data?
Yeah.
Where's the
and
data?
that's why.
Yeah.
Back to data.
Yeah.
I'm
Let's
actually
see
trying to
it
keep you
first.
guys on course too. Is
Please do.
realistically, do you think there's gonna be enough time to gather all this stuff up and do a report? I mean, to the level of detail you're looking at, or is this something that you like, you're gonna need to kick the can down the road? It's certainly something that like we couldn't do. The way Deep does is they hire a consultant that goes out and does a study on it and stuff like that.
Years long, yeah.
Yeah, is that gonna be a recommendation of this committee?
I guess it could be.
You know?
I mean, I was kind of hopeful that we could take what you had and find some value in what Stu had,
Mhm.
because it simplifies it, it would reduce the cost somewhat. It would move the ball forward. Is it all the way forward? That's not as far as I think we need to go, but I mean, practically speaking, we don't have anything to work with. I mean, we're all volunteers. and-
Right. No, I got it. So I'm just saying the only thing with Stu's thing is the whole jurisdiction.
But isn't
So
that,
it completely turns it on its head.
it does, but isn't that something, Jim, you know this end better than anybody, isn't that something that we could do through some paperwork change, I'll call it, I don't know. if it's-
Right, I mean, right, but that's the fundamental issue, the difference between what
Yes.
we're talking about. It's not a technical issue.
I don't
It's-
think so.
Well, that is like I said, from the perspective of, I'm gonna call myself, I'm the kind of the engineers, and I think the same for Mark, we're the tip of the spear here. The developers come to us and say, what can we do? And then we call you guys and say, hey, let's go do some soil testing.
Mhm.
And in the meantime, the guy says, I want, 200, whatever it is, so then I'm looking at the regulations and I'm saying, oh, DEP, Department of Health, you want to go to DEP? Well, hell no. What can I do to get away from that? Well, you got a pretty big piece of land here, right down the middle. And that's been a headache for everybody for years. It's just been like that. So I said to myself, again, if you're looking for some kind of efficiency, some kind of way to use the prescriptive regulations instead of waiting for years for DEP to futz with it, how do you do it? And there it is, it's all we're doing is saying,
Can I just say this, that obviously the goal is to find something that we can recommend, that the legislature, the chairs of the Public Health Committee, Majority Leader's office can utilize to pursue legislation, right? That can help with whatever mild reform there might be. To me, it sounds like, if we're talking about low hanging fruit, that your concept kind of maybe falls within that rubric. And the challenge is, we want to find consensus, right? We want to find consensus with both the DPH, sanitarians, and the developers and builders. What can we put on the table that goes beyond, the regulations as proposed by Matt already, right? What can we go? What steps can we go beyond that you think will be palatable to Deep and DPH? Are there any thoughts on your side of the table that you think like, oh, well, we could maybe push the envelope a little bit here or there?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things was when we originally talked about the 5,000 and the 7,500, and I talked with my managers on this, was when would we implement this? Like you had said, between 5 and 7,500 for at least a decade now, we haven't done anything with that. So there's two ways to approach it. So there is, I'm going to say, some wiggle room, perhaps, with that. In other words, maybe it's not 5,000, maybe it's 75 to 10,000 that this nitrogen's only required. So that's one thing that I can see. That whole thing that you're saying, I don't know, that just scares me a bit, just because it's so huge.
Which thing? Stu's idea?
Stu's idea, not with the gallons per acre.
Not with the technical.
It's
You're saying the technical merits are okay, but
Yes,
Political-
the policy political aspect of it, that I still don't know if that really helps or not, because I don't think what's gonna happen is nobody's gonna go to deep anymore. And furthermore, what they could do too, sometimes they don't like to come to us versus them meaning the locals. In other words, so in the threshold for that is 2,000 gallons. So what they'll do, it's gonna overwhelm these guys, because they're gonna get tons of developments, and they're gonna have every system less than 2,000, 1,900.
that won't change.
Because they don't want us looking at it.
But
And
that won't change.
No, it won't, but I do have to say on our end, like even just having the 10,000 go into play, maybe a recommendation going forward to look at it later on, but we may be getting overwhelmed in the first place. So even seeing what we do right now,
Yeah.
put it into effect, recommendations, go through the 10,000 gallons per day, because yes, now all of a sudden we have 10,000 gallons per day. If that works, it seems like a good idea to reconvene at that point and talk about
Right.
that. Right now, I think it is a little premature because I get a little nervous.
If we adopted Stu's concept tomorrow, what would the workload shift look like?
probably pretty significant, because it would open, it kicked the door down for a ton of everything. That is the main hurdle right there.
So this goes to the funding and staffing. I just remind me, is it 750 bucks for the big systems for you guys?
It's only 625.
625.
That's chump change.
But one of the things, we obviously, like I said, I've been thinking about this for a long time. It's never made sense to me that DEP for 7,501 gallons gets whatever it is, 3,500 bucks. Hey, Mark, what was your most recent application fee? 3,500 bucks to DEP?
No, 4,950.
4,000. Okay, so for 7,000, for 7,500, 625, right? You get the picture here.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me to say, pay to play over some gallonage. In other words, they shouldn't get all that and but that would help convince the powers that be, is if you say, ooh, here they come, and they're dumping, a couple or 3,000 or 4,000 bucks a pop. It doesn't take very many of those statewide to fund one or two more people.
It's so
It is
cheap,
key.
and make that money stays there.
I was gonna say, it's not.
Well, all fun. In other words, the point is,
We could mandate it.
Mandated.
We could mandate it. I mean,
Absolutely.
Okay,
yeah.
well, in a department, but
Well, that's
it
true.
still gets spread around.
Very good
quickly
point.
Because.
To the program.
However it works,
Yeah.
The point is, at least if there's a revenue stream that supports it, and I think that's fair.
Yeah.
And I'd be the first one to stand up with clients who come in and say, I don't want to pay that. Well, tough.
Yeah.
Go see the DEP or go somewhere else, because, it's not fair I've never thought that was right either, you know, that it's so much less expensive to go there than up there. And it's worse because it's the opposite.
Yeah,
They should be cheaper.
exactly.
They should be cheaper and you should be more expensive because you get something done.
Yeah.
So that's the way I see it. And I think if you can, you know, that should be part of it. If they want to do something like that, with it comes the bullet point. So if the legislature says, hey, okay, that's a good idea. The second part of the bullet point is you've got to change the fee schedule so that
I think from a builder's perspective, you know, I could probably say with almost 100% certainty that if we are improving turnaround times and allowing for more efficient use of the land and not having to create an LLC for
It's a no-brainer.
for every bifurcation, that you're going to find that developers are probably going to be willing to pay a couple extra dollars to allow for that.
We need to actually take that recommendation and shoot it down to process and funding, because I think they are starting to look at all different types of funding. This would definitely be one of the avenues.
well, this is, yeah, but just keep in mind that the reason that they're willing to pay that is to get that.
And to
You
get
know
more
what I mean?
funding, gets more staff,
Yeah.
for you guys,
Mhm.
DPH and TP, or TPH.
But just it keeps everybody's, except for maybe Matt's, life simpler.
Yeah, exactly.
Look at me.
You know what, guys, Deep has done is, and I'm actually jealous, is this whole general permit process. That's like we're done. I mean, they've done it with these holding tanks now, which I don't know if you guys are aware of this. It's literally just a thing that says statewide and everyone says Scouts on or I'll follow it. And like nobody checks on it.
Yeah.
It's like, wow. So, yeah, it's like everything now. All of our
corner and cry.
whole systems. It's all Scouts on, or I'll do it exactly. Yes, if nobody looks at it. All of our holding tanks, non-sewage.
That is not a benefit to the environment.
No, I agree.
It's not.
It's not. It's unbelievable how they've done that. And but anyway, that's just digressing there. Yeah, there's a lot that I'm going to talk about at our other meeting, like with our section, like with 4 programs and.
I'm sure if you show them what I wrote, there's gonna be some fist pounding and.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that basically is the whole thing. It's the lot split thing. That's really what that is. Nothing to nice lot split. It's to fix that, or at least try to fix that problem.
And there's a cost benefit and
Yeah. I just think no one's ever going to go deep again. They're just gonna stay below.
some will be there, or you'll get a lot more.
I
Remember, okay, let's look at it this way. The majority of the systems that we go to deep with now. Majority of them are roughly in the 10, 11, 12,000 gallon range anyway. You know? But if you go to 10,
Yeah, we're gonna.
you're gonna take them, you're gonna suck them up anyway. You know what I mean? You're gonna mop up the majority of those ones. When it used to be 5,000, you know, we fell in that 7,500 gallon a day thing all the time. You know, 50 bedrooms. It was always 50 bedrooms,
Yes.
7,500. We did, you know, bunch. So the
Stu, what's the biggest septic tank, or Mark, what's the biggest septic tank you can get in Connecticut?
I'm sure.
Connecticut, septic tank wise?
Well, we've seen them. There are 11s across the train tracks here.
Like made in place though?
No, they're brought. United
Brought
brought
in,
in.
you gotta be able to put it on, you know, a trailer, so.
Yeah.
They're broken up into
They were
series.
11.
Several different elements of the building. We've seen that.
20,000
So
gallons.
it doesn't matter the size.
Hold on a second,
Mark is just.
say, you guys, say that again, Mark?
I've done 20,000 gallon a day tanks, you know,
Yeah.
I've done 30. But
I don't think it matters the size of the tank so much.
it doesn't matter, it's how you can piece them
That's
together.
how, exactly, you can piece them together, have several
Piece
different
them
outlets
together,
for
you can put them
building
in a
with tanks
train,
and
whatever you
series.
need to do.
Yeah.
And all combined into one leach field. So.
Yeah, we've had to grapple with that with our code changes.
Yeah.
Because knowing that's why we allowed 3 tanks in series
Yeah.
because of that reason.
I do know.
Yeah. We have
Tanks in series on one side of the building, the other side of the building, 3 tanks in series, one, and then.
Or you custom, you build the thing on site.
I mean, it's just the reason I ask it, the reason I ask it is because of cost though.
Yes.
One in series doesn't work anywhere near as, I mean, you get into all sorts of issues with fluid flow through there,
Yeah,
but
we typically tell them to break, when you get a big building, you get one big building.
Yeah.
We tell them break the flows up anyways, or 2 or 3 tanks. Yeah. Or if it's, on the, well, what used to be called community systems, you get separate buildings, they all go into their own tank, and then you combine them in a manhole, and
By the way, that's a big win too with this, hopefully passing
Huge
these legislations,
benefit.
community
Yes, yes.
systems, to
Yeah.
get that back with us.
Yep.
That's a big win for
that's a
everybody.
great way.
Yes.
And that's gonna save money too.
Yep.
So instead
but
of.
see, now there's dogma, the paradigm change.
Well, that
It's not
was,
gonna be-
well, that was means you're.
You're still okay.
Well, I haven't implemented it yet, though, but I think ultimately, actually it'd be easier for us because instead of reviewing 5 separate systems, we only have to do 1 now.
Yeah.
Or even 15 separate systems, it's just 1.
But you wouldn't be getting those 15 separate systems. Is your workload gonna increase because of community systems?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Mentioning,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, the next step is then addressing that, right? We gotta figure out what we want, and then we gotta figure out how to get it.
So I was thinking, going back to what are they unhappy with, like with what was passed? It's, I mean, I know you say fundamentally, do we even need to consider nitrogen? And I don't know if that's too big of an issue to bite into with this. It's up to you guys.
That's why I was kind of trying to understand the general realm of nitrogen in the
Yeah.
state, right?
That's
And that's exactly where.
baseline data, right? I mean, it seems practical, so.
It does to me, but
I don't disagree. It's
I'm
just
still the
that-
guy that said what's different.
Possible to get that. And again, just to go back with what we did, we just says, okay, what areas? I mean, again, most people would agree the coastal areas, and then we said, if you're within the.
Do you want to spend some time talking? That's kind of, so we're kind of through stews. I don't know, are there any other alternatives? I think the other alternatives flow off of data, fertilizer or whatever it is. That's why I'd like to see that, but it is what it is.
So obviously, to add to the list though, is Matt has offered at least contemplating, reducing the gallonage from 7,500
To 10.
increasing, sorry, from 5,000 to either 7,500. right?
That's a possible.
I don't know if it's all, I heard that might be worth discussing further.
Yes. So just to go back to what Stu was saying about that, what did you call it, CAN?
Yes.
Is that what it's called? Yeah, the details of that, I mean, we could just implement it flat out just like this, and as you guys know, we can change the technical standards once a year. So we could implement it like it is, and then we could go back and think about that, the CAM, and modifying that within the technical standards, the details of how it's enforced, and maybe preclude certain areas. As
Yeah, we could generate our own map. We don't have to
Right.
use an existing map. So if,
But there's wiggle room with the timing of that. I'm just trying
Yeah.
to simplify this so we
So
can
do
move
we-
forward.
that's, yeah.
So
what
my
do
only
we could-
concern with that, by the way, is for me is obviously, it's the code advisory committee is just that. It's an advisory committee. You could have everybody on the code advisory committee say like, hey, we think that the CAN map should be more narrowly tailored to fit our needs. And Deep or DPH will say like, well, we appreciate what you said. We disagree.
This is,
And
once it's in there as a regulation, it's much harder.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot harder to get out of jail than it is to get in.
Well, and the reason we're sitting here is, to be candid, is that the technical, advisory committee, I guess, ability to interject has gotten less and less every year.
Yeah, it's,
To this year where it was an all-time low, is that fair?
Correct.
And frankly, that's a large reason why we're all here today.
But we are checking this out through the regulations. So one of the things is, this was actually put into the regulation, the Public Act 2597, about how your AT standard or policy and procedures and the technical standards were done, right? And it does put it in an advisory position. I think part of what we're looking at is making sure that we, can't really speak, I guess, have a seat at the table that's actually use
Yeah, let's talk,
advisory,
if you
you
guys don't
know?
mind, I'd like to get into that. So, and I talked about it with Dave this morning. So we hadn't changed these regulations since 82, okay? So, and that is so different than the technical standards process, okay? And so my hands were tied. I mean, you know, as a program, we were always very open. I like to, you know, very transparent. And that process, it's not that it's not transparent, but it's definitely a very rigid set of rules and how we release things and everything else. And I think a lot of the locals and even everybody else felt slighted, like somehow they weren't part of this and everything else. And all I can say is that's the standard process. At least that's what my attorneys tell me is this is.
We were told that, right? Who told us that, Jim? Somebody said to us, you understand this process. You really don't have a seat at this table. If you have a problem with it, you go talk to the legislature. Wasn't that what we were told?
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, and again, that's not me. I go to our attorneys for that stuff.
Yeah. No, we understand,
Yeah.
but the concern about kicking the can down the road is obviously.
But the technical standards though, and let's go back to that then. You know, that, well, in the past few years, it's definitely been more formalized, the process
Yes.
now. And, you know, we were told to do that. And I think probably at the end of the day, that's probably a good thing. You know, we have certain committee members, you have to appoint these people with this organization and all that.
I think that's fine, isn't
And
it?
I think what you guys, and I understand this, because Scully, to quote his words, he says this is not a democracy. And to Jim's point, yeah, absolutely, we could say, although I find it hard, but you're based off of me. I'm not going to be here forever because I'm heading the program. Somebody else might be different than me. I would be hard pressed if I was given a good explanation for something from the group to disagree with them, unless it was just something totally outrageous.
Yeah.
But you're right. You're relying on my, you know, goodwill. So there's no guarantees of goodwill. So I don't know. So perhaps that could be a recommendation.
I understand with the whole regulations that you don't have input or something,
Yeah.
but it sure as heck impacts us badly.
Yeah.
So if you bring down to 5, if you bring this down, and all of a sudden we are gonna be overwhelmed, so it's gonna stop right then and there. And that just, to me, I understand where they're coming from, but yeah, you're gonna put 18 with policies and procedures, no backup. Yeah, I'm very, very concerned because
Yeah.
my town is one that's gonna have a law.
Sure.
So I'm concerned about that.
Can I just-
too?
Alicia.
So obviously Rivers Alliance has opposed this jurisdictional shift for a long time,
Mhm.
in the legislature. And the reason for that
Yeah, that'd be good to hear.
is because the DPH system is so closed. There's really no way for us to have a lot of input into the environmental protections. And that DEP, DPH sort of, I think DPH is getting better at looking at environmental health because it is a public health issue, but it has not been a priority in the past.
Yeah.
So with that closed system, and again, you know, you said it's not a democracy, but there's a voice that's not there at the
Mhm.
table
Mhm.
as these things are being developed within DPH.
We can absolutely include Rivers Alliance, or we call.
Well, I was included when the you guys
The
first
response.
came out with, yeah.
But I think, no, as a more formal, because we have a list of all of our members, committee members, we need to do that. No, we recognize.
There was a time where Margaret came and Roger Reynolds came and there was a big group. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I definitely want it more formalized. I don't know if we call it environmental representative, something like that, because it's not just the Rivers Alliance. There might be other groups that might want to have, trying to think.
Same sound in TNC. TNC is very interested in this.
Yeah, it's a balance.
Absolutely, that's easy. That's easy. We could do that tomorrow. I mean, just put that literally as committee.
But it has to be, well, if you don't hear these individual groups at the meetings, it's gonna come back around to something like this again in a year.
No, I agree. I mean,
There needs to be a formal process, and I think somebody else, is that your group?
Yes,
working on
I
that?
was saying, that's what I was talking about, the regulation versus technical standards. My 5-year Lego battle was because something was in the technical standards and not in the regulations. You know, so I'm a little sensitive to that. I just, you know, I always go refer back to building. I talked to you about this a lot, but somehow they figured out how to get staffing. Somehow they figured out how to get continuing education credits. They figured it out. I mean, they figured out a way to fund your building officials, right? So now we're talking about a part of building and development that needs to be funded now, right?
Yeah.
So to me, it's like, I get it with the technical standards, but we also had a communication breakdown during the pandemic. And guess what? We in public health can't say that's not gonna happen again. So to us, yes, I think a more formal process, however it is that we do it, that makes sure everyone's at the table, meeting the people who are actually putting in the regulations in the first place. You know, so I don't know how to change that, because I don't think it's just to something.
No,
With local public health directors, I mean, Greg, you can probably.
Well-
Hands on that one.
Well, let's go back around to maybe that map, because we can think on what Matt did, what Stu did, I guess. We've all said what we've said. What about that's the environmentally sensitive areas, the environmentally sensitive nitrogen areas? How do we wanna, let's talk about that map. And we could draw our own map. I think the CAM map is a pretty broad brush.
I don't have the actual the draft regs for. So what was the actual definition of environmentally sensitive areas? Does anyone recall?
Can we get that up on?
Each town was gonna set them, aren't they?
no, we pulled that back.
Yeah. It's
Yeah. Well,
That's what you're asking for.
Yeah. Well, they didn't want, the towns actually didn't want that. They didn't want that responsibility.
But you know, in the towns that are under orders, we do all have wastewater facility plans, and each one of those wastewater facility plans have areas that are identified as sensitive, but it's not always coastal. It could be a hard pan situation, it could be tighter soils like silty soils.
And some of those are,
It's April still.
Yeah.
some of those analyses though, look, I work for
Yes.
Malcolm Purney.
Yeah, no,
We used to do that. And I will tell you that I wouldn't necessarily agree with my level of knowledge how that was all defined, which called a hard pan can't be treated. We can build septic systems in those spots. But certainly there are some areas, but can we use what the DEP orders are? Is there a way to use that as if there's an area in a town that has an order for nitrogen removal, let's just say, can we use that somehow? Is there a way to reference that in these rules?
it's more, you know, for us too, when you're doing, we have to update our facility plan, right? So we're gonna go out and redefine the areas now. So it is kind of like you're working with the town, but you're working with the town DEP. So you have someone oversight saying, no, you can't just say the whole entire town is environmentally sensitive.
No.
Right,
Because that's.
right. And that's what we want to avoid, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we want to be strategic.
We
and
want to get
We want to use a scalpel, not a sledgehammer.
we want to get value out of a dollar spent for nitrogen removal, right? At the end of the day, if there's going to be no value out of it, I mean, it seems like the low hanging fruit.
So, I mean, it sounds like there should be more of a formulaic process, right? That defines, well, two things, right? One is, first of all, we're calling it environmentally sensitive area. Should we call it a nitrogen sensitive area, right? Should we, because our scope here is to, discuss nitrogen and nitrogen assessments, et cetera. So maybe we don't talk more broadly about environmentally sensitive areas, because that, quite frankly, can open up the doors to a lot of different things, right? So,
Maybe call it a nitrogen review area, because that implies
We may have.
they gotta look at our regulations.
Here, I have one thought on that.
Exactly what I'm saying.
I have one thought on it. If you came to me and said, how do we figure out where you need to remove nitrogen, where you don't? Based on my knowledge, it's going to Long Island Sound. If this were me, if I owned Old Saybrook, I would go and I'd set a series of wells along the beach. It costs nothing to do this, all right?
Mhm.
So is there any way we can force to get real value and real data out of this process? That if you were to measure, before you call it a nitrogen sensitive area, you need to prove that it is. It's like over at Hawks Nest Beach. Who would have thought that wasn't a nitrogen issue? I never would have. But
Well, but when we're talking about surface water, we have the DEP's reports to the EPA.
we're talking about a lot of groundwater on the coast. It's predominantly groundwater on the coast, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's not entirely, they're not separate. We can't talk about groundwater and surface water like they're separate.
But we've already, I think, if it's fresh water coming down in rivers, I don't know, we're gonna capture that in through Matt's over 5,000, 7,500 gallons a day. you're applying that to all the projects there,
Within that gallonage, yeah.
right?
Well, there's the two formulas, like we talked about.
Yeah, whatever formula it is, you're not ignoring the uplands of Connecticut, feeding all the groundwater that feeds all the rivers that come down to the sound.
But
As
we're
we just,
talking about nitrogen sensitive areas, and you're
We
saying
are.
we need more data because you need we have some of that data, is what I'm saying. We have TMDLs, we have watershed protection plans specifically for nitrogen.
but if we're
That
gonna,
already exists.
if we're coming to Old Saybrook and we wanted to spend $1 to get value out of nitrogen removal, the first question you have is where on this beach? Don't broad brush it. Sonia might find that most of Guilford needs it because there's ledge, sand and gravel, overlying ledge going into the sound. It would,
Is nutrient loading from septic or subsurface treatment, is it a point source or a non-point source pollution?
it can be both.
Yeah.
It can be,
Mhm.
if you can identify it as a point source. So this is what's difficult here.
But we're tasked by the legislature to be protective and get value out of whatever cost we're causing somebody to spend. That's isn't that that's the role of this group. Look, Dave Potts, who has made pretty big investments in AT technology, would like to see an AT system on every home in Connecticut. All right, Dave Potts would. It's not my role. Dave Potts would like to see
I'm not
the Long
talking
Island
about
Sound,
systems everywhere.
but Dave
I'm
Potts
also
wants us.
talking about making sure we're not putting development where it doesn't belong, where it's going to make nutrient issues worse. So we have
But
to be
that's-
sensitive to that as well. You're looking at things on it in a very small system by system basis, and I'm looking at things from a watershed scale. And
I'm looking at
understanding-
nitrogen from I think we all are from the
Well,
Long
I think
Island.
what she's saying though, I don't know if it's realistic to do what you're saying. To parse it out, again, there's something to be said about having something like simplistic like this, because it helps things move along faster.
Yeah.
So there's a price to pay.
But I'm
for it.
I'm trying to make the point, Matt,
Yeah.
that there's the broad brush, the CAM approach,
Yeah.
or, conversely,
Mm.
there's a very accurate approach. And I'm not advocating for either.
Sure.
I'm just putting it on the
Well,
table, all right? And if you really truly want to know where the load to the Long Island Sound is coming in the town of Old Saybrook, I could very quickly go along that beach and tell you where the load is coming, all right? This is not I don't know why people don't do it. This is very simple engineering and science. And we would know exactly where it comes from. I think what you're going to find is there's going to be very discrete pathways from certain areas that go in the sound, in the groundwater, and you see a lot of nitrogen, and others you'll see less. Is it the organic matter underground from a former marsh that's got covered over and then developed, which is a carbon source, which removes nitrogen? I don't know. But that's the range we're looking at, and then we
I'm
can
gonna
pick
do
somewhere
some
between that.
watershed-based plans and just, so we can pull from that and actually get an idea, because the data has been.
Anything we could,
Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
But the other thing that concerns me, from the broader aspect and from a policy perspective, as far as water quality is concerned, is we keep talking about, everyone's in this room because you care and you want to do the right thing. And we have to make sure we have the regulations and permitting processes in place and the training for the people that are putting it on the ground to make sure that, we have the guardrails that are strong enough to keep the folks who,
but your guardrails are different than Jim's guardrails. Jim's guardrails and doing the right thing is they want to build the most cost-effective house possible. You want to protect the environment at all costs. Right? I get it. But
in the same lane.
we gotta somehow merge
Be in the same lane as Jim and make sure that we can be.
The question is, where do we have common
Consistently
ground?
applied.
Can we find common ground and all work together on that for the betterment of the state, as I see it? So I think figuring out what the environmentally nitrogen sensitive areas is really our next step.
Mhm.
And if the CAN map's a broad brush, I think it generally is. And going in and actually saying if you want to set environmental sensitive area, you have to prove that that area actually is causing environmental harm to Long Island Sound. I mean, that's the opposite of
So-
perspective.
So if there's a way, I think what I heard you say was you have a way to show some of these areas that have been identified?
Yeah, through the
Aside
DEP's
from-
water quality.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a way, do you think, I'm assuming that's all electronic, I wonder if there's a way for us to get that and overlay that on the CAM map?
Yep.
Yeah,
And draw a nice big CAM map that we could lay on a table and look at it. And go around it and say, this makes sense here, that doesn't make sense over there.
Yep.
And go around and draw our own lines.
Yeah.
And think about that, and you know what I mean? And then you'd be able to look at it. A little more,
I'm not familiar with the CAN map. Where does that live?
it should be a deep, right? I think it's in the.
It's,
You can, it's one of the, yeah. You can go, it's just like
Area
the
management.
USGS map on the.
Why are we only looking at coastal areas?
no, we're gonna do, we have the second one is the upland areas with the wetland setback. We have got to that yet. We can
Okay.
talk
it
about
would be interesting to talk to someone like an entity like Yukon
Clear.
GIS.
Yeah,
See if
yes.
we could-
Clear would be able to do that.
But the GIS mapping
Yep.
of the data, overlaying your data with some GIS mapping would be, I think.
Is CAM and CTE go? Do you know?
We-
Because the overlays probably already
What's
exist.
happened is, like, we all use AutoCAD and everything and, and various word programs. But the state has a variety of programs that are not compatible with
Yeah.
anything we have. And you can't tell me that's not by design, but it is.
Well, if we, back to that one database thing. Conversations about that during.
Yeah, I mean, it could be the recommendation is that we use, that data overlaid on some sort of mapping tool that should be revisited like every, third year or fifth year to identify any changes in the mapping areas that are identified as nitrogen sensitive.
Did you find it?
Yeah, just that it's going to get geodata portal.
Yeah.
So the coastal
It should
area
be.
polygon layers
Yeah.
on them.
So what do we got? Half an hour left. What, are there any other,
Yeah, half an hour.
but you want to take?
Sorry,
Just
I'll be right back.
take turns, we'll keep going. Are there any other, action items we want? So we,
Oh, when she comes back from, are we gonna discuss what's your guys' position on the wetland areas now?
He told them
What did you feel about,
They went on
like,
straight.
if you're within the wetlands for setback and stuff?
I think
that seems pretty reasonable, because again, you're gonna avoid those areas anyway. Just because you're gonna get from a new development perspective. And, so it's almost like, it's not, chances are it's probably not gonna be implemented that often. You know what I mean? You're not gonna have to be forced to do that. Because it's only the system. So you could buy a huge 100-acre property and, 2/3 of it could be in the wetlands area, but as long as you stay out of those areas for your
how
development,
far out?
well, whatever they delineate per town.
Well, we better give it,
Yeah, well, see,
Yeah,
well,
you can't have a health code that says 25 or 50 or 100 feet is far enough. And then say, well, but a good town gets to say it's farther.
Part of the problem is all these different towns have been going to all these different
Yeah.
directions.
I mean, that's the great
That's
thing about the state building code, right? Is that
Yeah.
state building code gives you a minimum standard to protect the health and safety
Yeah.
of the public and requires that the towns cannot require anything above that, right? You can incentivize builders and developers to build beyond the code, and it could be a product that the individual.
Some reasonable distance, like,
you want to discuss it?
well. What is it, the DEP for years has been, and I always use DEP, the old guy thing. But, they've, pushed for many years for the 100-foot regulated area around inland wetlands. Many of the towns listen to, Michael Clemens or whoever, was pushing for a lot more as whatever they want to call it, protective buffer regulated area, upland review area. There's a million
that's what it was.
names for it.
Yep.
When I started in the business, inland wetlands were down there and you didn't go into wetland. Very quickly, it came to 25 feet, then it went to 50 feet, then it went to 100 feet. And when it started out, the 25 feet was kind of, well, just be careful when you go in there. And then 50 feet was, well, you need a permit and you can only do certain things in there. Now the 100 feet, which were what the majority of the towns have, is this is basically our property and thou shalt not go in there. And now we've got these things with 100-meter, 200, it's all.
I would say that is totally not true, seeing across the state decisions within the upland review area.
What are we talking about? What?
You're talking about the upland review area, right?
Yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
saying, go ahead and say what part of what I said was wrong. 'Cause I can only tell you from my
It's a
experience.
no-touch area. That is absolutely not true.
No, I'm telling you that when you go in for a permit, the initial reaction is, why are you going in there? This area is where, this is where the amphibians are gonna live and, the canopy is a problem. Look, I sit in these meetings.
This is not my experience and across the state, no. In my experience, it's quite the opposite.
Hey, Mark, what do you think, Mark? Let's hear
What do I
Mark's
think? I love the conversation. I absolutely love the conversation. And it really comes down to is that the thresholds on wetlands, I mean, has gotten to the point where, and I'm with Stu on a lot of this. I work all the way from Greenwich all the way to Stafford Springs, all the way across the state. And yeah, there are some communities that are definitely more, I call reasonable in terms of working within their setback. The 100 feet is a common number. In my own town in Southbury, we've had 50 feet now for 40, 50 years. Never changed anything because their viewpoint is, 50 feet in most areas. That gives them a lot more headway to actually regulate and look at impacts. The 100-foot, when you go in, and there are towns, and a lot of the towns are on the coastal community, which almost think they own that property. And I've been on that coin where 100 feet, boy, I'll tell you, do not touch it.
Yeah.
And it's and to the point, even with septic systems, there is no question. You can. My goal always is to keep a septic system at least 50 feet away from a wetland watercourse, because you need that travel length in order to get full renovation to the wetland system. Okay. But keeping in mind that if you can do that, that's great. But I'm a firm believer that, it's the science behind it. And if you have a good consultant team and you can prove that there's no reasonable, impacts, there's no impacts that are going to cause harm to the environment, then, you have to do that. But I'm with Stu. There's so much. I work in Greenwich, and I can tell you, it's one of the smartest wetland commissions around. Their wetland setback is 35 feet. 35 feet in Greenwich. Yeah, we've had issues where, whatever. But again, it's all based on the science and this whole idea that some communities and, 100 feet, they own it. And it's not worldwide, like to your point, but it's, and the threshold now is every year you start to see that some people are talking about 125 now, and then you're going to see 150. This is all confiscation in my mind, because you're not allowing the science, to work the property.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the thing is, there's a lot of really high-level scientists that study exactly this and the effect of septic systems on wetlands that would argue, I hope it's if you put it on the ridge on the wrong side, if it's 100 feet and you put it on the other ridge, it's going away from the wetlands. The benefit would have been to go to the wetlands. So,
Exactly. So
From a
I met
nitrogen
recently,
perspective.
and Sonia's very familiar with the project I've done in Guilford over on Guilford Village West, and we were hammered by all sorts of folks. And George Logan for one time actually agreed with all of my analysis in terms of how it affects vernal pools. And, so it comes down to, having the right information, the right data, making sure that it's there in place. But this arbitrary number, sometimes is not correct. But septic system wise, I don't know where, Matt, if there's changes in that direction. But the 50 feet to me is a reasonable number, always has been within the confines of the distance to a wetland or a water course. Going closer than that, you better have some real good scientific data that you're going to be okay.
But you guys were talking about inland wetlands now. Remember, we're local health, right? We're talking about environmental health and nitrogen for that. What I've seen from all these different towns is it's very difficult for developers as well as local health to handle it because you have different, by town, you have a different thing that you are trying to target. And are we looking at inland wetlands is looking for environmental protection, right? We're dealing with the septic systems. We're getting stuck in the middle. I can tell you projects that I've dealt with Matt, with him, all stuck in the middle between these, this war between inland wetlands and the developer, and we shouldn't be there. This should be based on science, right? It's not about whether it vertical, which I understand, not our fight. Not.
No, I understand it, and because and it gets back to training and support from the agency, right? DEP has almost no resources put into supporting 170 towns. And they're doing the best that they can. But there's a lot of nuance here, right? Because there is a lot of case law that goes against everything you said. So it's there's,
And that's.
it's very nuanced. And you know what? When it comes to both drinking water and wastewater, none of the local land use commissions understand their role.
no, that,
Yes,
None
none
of
of
them
them
do.
do.
None of them do.
so is a 50-foot setback something this group would be comfortable with? Or 50-foot
You're saying
review area
for your nitrogen.
for yours?
50-foot boundary. The only thing I want to just say, guys, is how this would play out. Let's just go over an example. So all this was saying was that if you want to develop within this upland review area, whichever it may be in a particular town, you would have to follow the deep nitrogen evaluation. Well, let's face it, most likely if you would have to do that anyway, because the wetlands people will be jumping up and down on you anyway. So how does that?
We'd like to,
Why encourage them?
but we would like to get it so that these rules also are the rules you follow, period.
Yeah.
So there is no, so I mean, if the sanitarian approves the septic system, there should be no inland wetland
Yeah.
conversation, right? I mean,
But it's the sanitarian trained to do that.
if they are more so than the inland wetland, then
Well,
Well,
yeah.
all of them have to be trained.
That's why the regulations are prescriptive.
Yes, it's 50 feet.
You know,
All right, so you want it more uniform. I mean, that sounds like a reasonable.
From my perspective, I think we would all be better off, the whole state would be better off, even if we accepted 50 feet. Than if we get into all the other quagmire. If you meet the 50 feet, no more no more review by the.
So let's say, here's the wetlands, and maybe you can help me with this. It's delineated the upland review area, and then we would say 50 feet beyond that, if you're within 50 feet of that. Is that how this would play out?
Because then you're additive there.
Oh.
The upland review area
Yeah, but
is the area between the high water mark, I believe, and 100 feet or whatever the local.
Oh, that's a number already.
That is, it's 50 feet in some areas. It is different in different areas. And sometimes there are reasons for that. It has to do with slope and the quality of the water. And that area is where activities are reviewed.
Okay. But they define it. So I don't think we want to be contradictory. So if they have 100 foot and we say it's okay to be 50 feet, I mean, unless we don't reference that.
But that.
I think we just say there's a 50-foot setback
From
from
what?
X.
Well, yes.
What though? Yeah.
Yeah.
You already said it, wetlands and water courses is the way it's set up in the technical.
And then wetlands are not in the code.
Not wetlands.
Nope.
It's just open places.
Oh, does it say open?
Water.
Well, you can say, you know, the enact delineating wetlands
I
and
agree.
freshwater water.
Well, then it
I
would-
think it makes sense to only have water courses because they
So the
said
whole
wetlands
thing-
have their own.
Matt, so the whole thing, even if you set 50 feet, what I really always had a problem with wetland commissions. Department of Health, just think of the name, Department of Health. They are there, Department of Health, over the years has set up regulations that have been, and to my knowledge, I haven't seen any real issues, that basically is protecting public health, welfare, and the environment. As soon as a wetland commission gets in, Department of Health approves a a septic system that's 50 beyond the 50 feet, say it's 60 feet out. Okay, you meet their threshold. And then you've got wetland commissions coming out and completely saying you need to give us a big technical analysis, and they're exerting the jurisdiction of your local health department and state health, and looking for reasons, for whatever reasons, to deny it when public health says this is technically feasible and it meets the public health code, which says in its context, saying it's environmentally safe. So it's really, this is really, and once you start this going down, one town starts it, the next town starts it, every town in the world is going to question the Department of Health on a feasibility. So when you're talking about how our cost cutting and being able to make this right, they got to stop getting into other people's jurisdictions. Now, not to
All right,
say
can
that
I
when
give
you
you
put
an
a health
example,
department,
though?
not to say when you put a septic system within 100-foot setback, yeah, there's other issues you have to take a look at, clearing, you know, other things that they have the rights to look at, but they should not be turning around saying that that septic system is not feasible. And that's what I've seen so much.
Let me give you an example of where this has happened though, and I'm not gonna give town names, but on a AA headwater stream,
Mhm.
there was a large complex being proposed, and it had to be on a community system. That the only place to put this community system was under a parking lot, and there was data proving that if that septic system was put there because of the soils and whatever else, that it was going to increase nutrient loads to this AA headwater stream. DPH approved it. So I think you have too much faith in some of these decisions to cross over onto the environmental health side.
So what you're saying, it was a large system, so it was within DPH. Obviously, it was with the state health department. Had to be, if that's large. Anything over 2,000 gallons is considered large. And it was close. How close was the system to the?
I'd have to look and see, but there were the folks who, this wasn't political, this is about
Right,
water
right.
quality.
Yep.
Hired people and proved that yes, it would increase nutrient loads to that headwater AA stream. These things happen. They happen.
But
And
my
we need to
question
make
would
sure that
be,
we
are
have a
you
system
talking?
in place that is black and white enough that it doesn't
Right.
happen?
No, my question would be, when you say includes nutrient load, and was it increasing nutrient load that it went beyond the water quality standards?
That's the question.
Oh, we're talking about a headwater stream.
No, see, the state DEP and everything starts from the water quality standards in the state of Connecticut. On all streams, AA, AAA, GA, whatever you want to call it. So when you look at it, even that is the basis for all the decisions are made. So if that client had exceeded that number and somebody proved it, then it's the burden of proof would be on an applicant. But if they did not, if they did not,
You're throwing this in the middle again, though. You're throwing local health in the middle again, and I understand what
No,
you're saying.
no, but this
But-
wasn't,
No, I'm just saying, so when we regulate something, we look at the script if it's the code. I don't have a choice on whether to say it's whether it's, more sensitive or not. I wish I could, but that's why we're here.
right,
When it gets to a point where a code, we've had people rip apart my septic design review. Okay, how many sanitarians do you think are gonna be able to handle that? And more long, more projects being stopped and stopped and stopped. When we're dealing with it, we're dealing with the Connecticut Health Code. We look at it and it may have been approvable by the Connecticut Health Code, but not taking into consideration environmental protection, just environmental health. So it's like we getting stuck in the middle of these things and
Yep.
we shouldn't be. I understand what you're saying, but
And it
that isn't
didn't-
the wetlands,
but
not.
he's saying that.
But it didn't
this
have
is
mass
all-
analysis,
environment Is
right?
considered in all of this.
It didn't, I mean, let's take a step back. Well, while we're sitting here, is Matt put forth an analysis, right? That would theoretically have prevented that.
Yeah.
And if they went through Matt's analysis, which is the DEP analysis, I mean, dumb me down. If it said it passes, it would meet the water quality standards. And then if those people were still complaining, that's exactly our point we have. That's not okay.
Yeah, it's not good. I want that firm science there so we can. say
Yes.
yes
What
or no.
I'm doing is removing, what we're proposing would have been on board with the wetlands folks. And should you decide to develop in their areas, now we give you specific tools. So because Sonia and I couldn't do that probably in
Yeah.
that situation.
Okay.
We didn't have, we couldn't require anything for nitrogen.
Yes.
So we're like, sorry, we can't help.
Now
you.
we can.
Now we can do that. But that's why I instead of sitting a flat 50 foot, and I'm not saying you agree or disagree with that, you're still gonna have people that are 100 feet that then are gonna, that's just gonna be a problem then.
We're gonna have to try to get something
Yours-
through.
You've settled the science.
Should be
Yeah.
50 if it becomes less,
Yeah.
right?
So you're gonna pick, you're gonna
Yeah,
pick,
less is.
Yeah,
yeah, so you pick a number and say, this is the bare minimum that's required for the set.
Yeah.
That these,
it's just,
the public health in the context of.
so our attorneys,
Is satisfied.
when they were looking at this, they were saying, well, let's just get something that's already defined.
Mhm.
So that way then we don't have to get into the weeds of it. And that's,
Yeah, but that's gonna be it's too arbitrary.
Yeah,
I mean,
it could- it could-
So, I mean, the science,
you gotta come up with something.
if we can address the
Very
science,
well.
first we do the science,
Yeah,
right? Let's just say it's 50 feet. I'm
Yeah.
just gonna throw that out.
Sure.
We can change it another time. Then we gotta get into the legal end of it and that, or
The
whoever
way it
knows.
works with inland wetland commissions is they will broad brush, every town has an official inland wetland map. Most of them are very broad brush, some of them are supplemented over time as applicants come in with, inland wetlands that are delineated by a soil scientist and located by survey. They then upload that into their GIS, some do, some don't.
okay.
But bottom line is, the two are more or less interchangeable for some things. In other words, they'll look broad brush at their inland wetland inventory map. If you come in and you want to build a house on this lot over here, they'll look at that and they'll say, oh, there's nothing mapped within, several hundred feet. So, okay, you're good to go. They'll look at the property and say, nothing obvious, okay, good to go, most of the time. Then what'll happen though is if you have a large piece and there's probably wetlands in the area, we hire soil scientist, he goes out. That then is adopted. If they do it correctly by state statute, they adopt that as an amendment to their inland wetland and water courses map. Most commissions don't bother with that anymore. They just move right to part 2, which is, okay, we're just gonna accept this as the line and now that's it. So if you were contemplating inserting a distance, you would simply say, it's either the wetland and water courses map or the inland wetlands mapping that's produced by the applicant. That's, as part of his map or plan that you're looking at.
Okay.
I thought you were talking about just water courses though. I thought you were talking about just water courses.
No, that's in our technical standards right now. That's what we're saying. We don't address wetlands at all as a consideration.
So
It's a problem for us when we.
Yeah, but that, I thought that's what I.
Well, we probably gotta get, we got 10 minutes left,
Yeah.
so.
So whatever you guys.
What are our action items here? I've got the data request. I mean, we're all in agreement if we can get at least some general numbers that might help us. Is that, everybody good? The CAM map, we're gonna try to get hold of the overlay, that's where, so for the next time we get together,
Lining up a conversation with George, I think is.
you want me to try to get George for the next meeting? Is that, because maybe that would help dial us all in on how others have done it?
Who's George?
George Hoyfelder, he used to run the Mass Test Center. He's still there. Yeah. All right, so
You guys
I,
like coming here, like meeting in person, as opposed to Zooming?
Yeah,
I like it in
I just think
person.
that.
or somebody, if we go to the Portland Library, doesn't matter to me. I'm happy to go wherever.
You can always go to the Barbara's building too.
Okay.
That's, I think that looks really
The
well.
parking and all up there is a bear.
Yeah, no, I'm fine coming here.
That's my own attitude, but
This is great because it's a nice.
It's good
Place.
having, we have to have the Zoom option.
we do.
Yeah,
What about, asking somebody who is the oversight in the wetlands in general from DEP to come and talk to us?
I think, and we didn't have Audra come today, so I don't know how.
I'm just thinking because, we have all these different things that have happened in the wetlands, she's having to work with someone who's telling them,
Also preparing upper working group that's in that's,
All right.
who knows what's gonna come out of that as well.
So you want me to see if we can line up George for the next one? What do we want to do, time-wise to get together again?
So I mean, so as far as George goes, you guys could.
we could.
You
keep this
may
moving.
or may not want to have that as part of another meeting and maybe
We'll
for
do
his
that for-
convenience to do that via
Okay.
Zoom. And do that at George's availability and
Okay.
if that works for us. But for our next scheduled meeting, where we're hopefully going to have some additional information, including the CAN maps, maybe we'll have some deep data, I don't know, and.
NDPH data.
Yeah, maybe we set that we put that request for information in today, this afternoon, and, maybe tentatively schedule a meeting for next week.
And we can put that request in through,
We can talk about that offline.
all right. All right, so I will put George off for the next meeting. We'll try to get him maybe
I
for a
would say just
follow-up.
give George a call, and see what his
Availability is.
We can then circle back with either
Okay,
and, figure out when to fit that in. My assumption is that's gonna be like an hour conversation.
with George. I think George could present his general explanation in an hour or so, but imagine the questions are gonna be, sitting here today.
Maybe we schedule, hour and a half. Good.
Yeah, I think that's an hour and a half or 2 hours, and he'll come, if, be my guess he'd give us.
I don't know where in Massachusetts he is, so I don't know if it's a inconvenience for him to come.
I'll ask him if he'd come, he might, or Zoom. I mean, he's good on him. I'm sure that way. All right, so I'll talk to George. When do we want to get together again?
I would suggest that we don't let too much time go by, right? Like, our entire group will be meeting next week, right? So next Wednesday, I don't know if you want to do it before then, so you have something additional to report.
I don't know how many, I mean, take another 3 or 4 hours from everybody before then, it's gonna be tough, I
Yeah.
would think, isn't it? I mean, you guys tell me.
Well, it's just
Talking
not-
a day, maybe 2 weeks?
And that's Veterans Day, so nobody will be around anyway, but.
So you want to shoot for something like the 18th, maybe? Is that?
I don't think I can do that. I gotta go for tooth surgery. That could be one of the.
How about the night before how about the morning before the next one we got one, is it the 19th, I guess? When's our next meeting?
Our next meeting was the
12th.
12th.
All right,
So we can do the 11th. Well, 11th is just the
Four-
day. Right?
or the morning before,
Or you can
the
do-
morning of, sorry.
11th what? November?
Yeah.
Well, I have
That's
to go off on
Veterans Day.
Veterans Day.
Oh, all right, so that's, forget it. Gotcha.
Well, I mean, as far as getting the conversation with George, you can do, you know, the 12th, 13th, 14th, and we can schedule our 2-week meeting for some time after that, right?
We could do that, yeah. It might take us time to get stuff anyway, so maybe it'd be better to hear from George.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah, George. So. I
Dave,
don't know.
maybe, but your point with George, whatever, maybe it's a bridge version, maybe this is a 2-hour meeting instead of a
Right.
4-hour meeting.
Right.
And
Right.
just
Yeah.
have him and maybe concentrate, see if we can not just get him, but if there's other states that you think we should get regulations out and then maybe send them out to the team beforehand, and then concentrate that 2 hours of just looking at how other regulations go.
yeah, I mean, I would, based on working all over, George knows what's good in Massachusetts, and he would also tell us what's bad. Right? He would say, here's what we do well and here's what we don't. I mean, I probably would, I would start personally with George and see what his perspective is. He's got a science perspective to back up the regulations
How
and
does,
see where that goes.
how does Friday the 14th sound for,
I-
you know,
I-
a conversation with George?
Fridays are always tough for people, but aren't they? Are they? Or
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I can do Fridays. I don't mind doing Fridays myself.
Early afternoon or late morning or something like that. Or
What about
Thursday's not moving, so that's gonna be tough. But you guys can have a meeting without me.
Yeah.
I'll watch it.
well, it'd be good for you to hear it. The 12th was something, that was a special day.
Well, it's Veterans Day, right? It's a-
No, the 11th is Veterans.
No,
Day.
no, but-
The 12th is.
12th would work.
You want me to see about the 12th and how about the 12th and 13th for everybody? Are those options?
Yes. Thursday night, yeah, man.
That's the worst.
So it'll be Saturday's budget here. so-
Yeah, understood. Mark, how are you? 12th or 13th?
Either day works for me.
Why don't I see if I can get George, what time do we want to do?
You have a preference, man?
Yeah, well, I would do morning, both times with
Yep.
him.
Perfect.
Okay.
We're talking the morning of the 14th.
George is a morning guy anyway. I don't know if he's working the afternoons
Morning of
anyway.
the 12th or the 13th.
If I had a preference, I'd rather do the 13th, but if I had a
Okay.
preference.
Let me, if everybody's in agreement, I'll see, or you want to do 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock? What's best for everybody?
8:30 works better for me only because I got grandkids.
Okay.
9, call it
9.
9.
You want to call it 9? Perfect. Then
9.
George. All right. I'm gonna try to set it up for that. That'll be our next meeting.
And
Yep.
who's gonna try to get the CAM map?
I'm gonna see if Clear,
You wanna try to
I
figure
want to
this
see if
out?
Clear can send us an overlay. They might already have it somewhere. And where did you say it, Leonard? You didn't know?
Oh, you know.
Okay, yeah, Clear could probably.
Sorry, Thursday, 11/13th at 9 with George, if it works for you.
12th or the 13th.
And here,
It could be remote, it could be here. If you guys want to have it here, I didn't really want to have it here because
no,
I didn't want people not feel comfortable coming here. So that's why it was gonna be at Greg's, but then he had the challenge.
well, remote would work better.
You've got good candy. I like it.
Let George decide if it's gonna, you know, obviously, we're trying to accommodate him. So
Yeah,
that's-
he'll probably have a hard time being here. He's an early riser. You never know. He might get here at 9. I don't know. We'll see what let me ask. But I think George is good on Zoom and all that, so I think,
Yeah, I'll be on Zoom myself, so.
all right, good enough. We got a plan? All right, well, thanks everybody for all the time. I'll be in touch.
Will do.
All right, have a good day. See you, Mark.
Enjoy.
Yeah. Thanks,
now.
Peter.
See you, Peter.